G'day, folks. AoS Coach here, and we are going to be talking. I realize I haven't talked about this faction for a long time, and I think partially because the list building has been boring as all hell. The true story, I've been wanting to talk cities from the while. I am a cities boy. I love my cities, but it has been boring list building, and there's been enough changes now. Not that this is the reason why we're doing it. By the way, we're talking cities of Sigmar. We have the Grand Patriarch of the Great Dice, Dylan Terrio, who's going to be talking to us about cities. Not only is Dylan the top ITC Age of Sigmar, Cities Sigmar player for 2025, you were 2025 top overall, if my research is correct, and you're currently leading 2026. Although I did see a Blair Corn sitting on there. So Fabian did ask me to say hello and did give you a little bit of a little rabbit punch to say, well, what are you doing? But anyway, we're talking cities, and I'm going to get Dylan to introduce himself in a second. We're going to talk a lot about cities because for the first time, I think for a while, this faction has gotten interesting. And I say that because probably the last 6 months have been very, very, very obvious with the cities list. There's been 1,000 to 1,500 points that have always been rewritten, right? You've had your Patriarchy in there. You've had your Scourge of Gyran Knights. You're going to have, if you take your Knights, you take your Cavalier Marshal. You probably take one Great Cannon. If you can take one Great Cannon, you take 3 Great Cannons. Then you get a Fusilier Major on the Warhawk. Then you probably take in the Veteran Cannoneers. You kind of get my point here that in cities hasn't been very interesting, but James Workshop, I think, as Rhino from Discord rightly pointed out, I think James Workshop hates cities of Sigmar, and there's been points adjustments, there's been rule changes, and if I was cities player right now, I'm going, right, what the F am I going to do? There's been too many points changes that are over 2K. There has been rules adjustments where I'm like, what's worked for me for the last couple of months might not necessarily be what serves me for the next 6 months. So, with my TED Talk monologue done, I'm going to let Dylan introduce himself, and probably that's the context of the show. Where are we at? What does good look like? What can we learn from the last 6 months? And then how do I think about cities moving into the future? I really want to think about the future and the last 6 months. Anyway, Dylan, g'day, welcome.
Thank you for having me, obviously. I mean, I think we had been talking about an episode like this since, I think we met at Adepticon 9 months ago this year, or last year, actually. And you had the same feeling at the time, which was you kind of wanted to look at cities, but it just seemed like the lists were obvious, or they were all old world models or whatever. And a lot has changed since then, but it's still you're right. It was, in a lot of ways, they sort of, especially with the strength of the faction over the summer, it was quite easy to see what you should build and what you should bring a lot of the time. And it's it is, at least personally speaking, the list writing is interesting now because it's become very, very difficult, right? I am struggling to find lists that I feel extremely confident about, but we also don't have a book in sight or anything like that. So we're stuck with what we have for the next, probably 6 months is my guess. For how long until the book, I don't really know, but it probably seems likely that we're within the next 6 or 9 months or so. But regardless, you still need to figure out what to do at this point when the faction is getting already hard to play, and then the list writing is becoming more difficult too. Yeah.
It's really interesting because you're right. Outside of a crazy person like Jeremy Lefebvre, who just run all of the assassins in the world and the Nobling Regiment of Renown, and he's got some real cracked lists. A lot of cities lists have been very traditional. You go all in on Fusiliers. For a while it was all in on Fusiliers. Then we went into a meta that was heavily based on dwarves and iron drakes and having hammerers and things like that. We were just going all in on the dwarves and the Rune King and all that stuff. Then we've gone all in on the knights, and we had for a little bit of time as well the steam tank commander with 2 or 3 steam tanks, and I ran that that in the Wildercorp Hunters. I loved it.
This is a good time,
or is it? Yeah, that one was the 3rd edition. Was that was
the fourth one was the end of 3rd. There were some wild you got 8 steam tanks. They're all on 2 up save, 5 up board, and they're healing 2d3 each or whatever. Yeah, that was a really interesting time too.
I took it to a teams tournament just before the end of the third edition. It was so much fun. But my point is, like, you've had all these like real standouts, and like from a list building perspective, I don't think that the unit selections have been fair. Like, it's been real standouts, and then like no one takes the dark elves. Like, no one's touching the dark elves, and now all of a sudden no one's taking the dwarves, and now like we haven't seen steel helms for God knows how long. It's just isn't pulling it out of. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's. You're totally right, and I think it's one of the weirdest things about this faction is like we've not had a book this edition, and yet there's been like 4 different eras of like what is strong in the book, and it's been kind of obvious at the time, like what is going to work really well, and it was usually like that was like context dependent. Like the points have changed a lot for some factions, and there are some of the like subunits in the book or the index, and some rules have changed, but like largely like the earlier GHV was very like you had to fight in the middle on turn 2. And this one is not nearly as much about that, right? So you had to find the shifting like environment of the game would kind of tell you which unit you needed to take, versus and we reached that point now. Now there has been like a lot of the rules changes have moved what you take quite a bit, right? So especially with the Scourge of Gyran changes, like we used to never run humans in any meaningful amount, like any of the core stuff. Like some people took Fusiliers. I've always been sort of like a pet unit forcer of Fusiliers in a lot of ways, and I think they have a lot of good value and they're cool, but they were never like everybody's choice. But now we've come all the way around where like it's kind of clear that the humans are where this faction, they finally settled us up there, right? It started with elves and dwarves because the human, I think it was, anyways, early in the edition we started off with like a lot of mixed bag, right? 20 Fusiliers, 20 Executioners, 20 Hammers, and 10 Drakespawn Knights, right? Just like one of each. Good units, period. Went and fought in the middle, had a lot of like utility and could, punch up often. It changed into like really scrappy lists with like a lot of MSU shooting and things like that. And then following that with Scourge of Gyran changes, we had the summer where like the triple cannon with the Pontifex with 20 Cavaliers like really changed the game for that faction. Really put it over the line, honestly, in terms of balance. It's pretty amazing what we get up to. But, we've reached a point where the dwarves and the elves have been pushed out. Functionally with the pointses, they just becoming very, very they're becoming very expensive for what they do, and human units usually now can compensate and do what they were doing for cheaper. So we sort of have pushed entirely into the human realm at this point, and it looks like we're going to be sticking there because not only are the models for elves and dwarves almost certainly going to be removed from the game in the medium or near future. It's just you sort of have to assume that's going to happen. Like you're going to stick with those, core human units are sort of the only paint left for your canvas, right? So come and put slow.
You make a really interesting point because I think that's part of my frustrations in cities is that at times where I've gone to go pick it up, having the dwarves and the elves have been like some of the most stronger units. And one, I don't want to buy them. I'm a human player. I came from the Empire. I love my humans. Got the new sculpts.
They look so good.
They look beautiful, right? And to your point, if I go and buy those dwarves or those elves, it's like this ticking time bomb of like, how long have I got these models before they are truly moved to the old world? And it's a risk that I don't want to take. So I've like put them on the shelf. I'm like, cool, love my Talia, love my cannons, love my Fusiliers, but my Free Guild General on Griffin and my Flagellants and my Hurricanum and like Luminet, like my Luminarch, I even my Steam Tank, I'm like, how long do you still have left in this faction? And I don't want to create like this guy's falling, folks.
It's not. I don't want to make it. But you're totally right. Is like that's a big problem because not like I play this game way too much, right? So it's not an issue for me to say like, okay, I'm gonna take these models that are gonna disappear in 6 months. I'm gonna take them to like 6 tournaments. That's worth it to me. But for most people, like, to engage in a faction where you're going to build 1,200 points, you're going to paint it only to have like those models, which were not even that good looking comparatively anymore, like drop out. Like it's just not fair. It's not a reasonable expectation. I don't think anybody should come to this faction unless they really love those models and are going to keep them around. Like it needs to be a fair expectation about what you're doing with it, right?
And it was a really weird problem. I want the Ridney off. Just
at least now the faction is playing the models that you sort of can comfortably say, I will keep these in the future, right? And then you can be cute. You can be like, well, all of my Dark Elves will be Steel Helms in the future, like, or some kind of conversion or proxy. That's fine, but not really what you want either at the same time. But anyways, yeah, it's especially, at least that is, I don't know if I would call it a relief, because also disappointing for a lot of people who have really big Dark Elf or like dwarf collections that they really liked to play, and like those are no longer really meaningful units to take, and even worse, they just will disappear from the game at some point. So it's also disappointing too. It's sort of a difficult place to be with the faction.
I've been there every single Band-Aid rip for every book when Cities first had the Band-Aid rip, and I lost like, my God, my old list. I have, even going back to like pre-Cities, when Cities was a supplement book off the base of a campaign, which then became Cities of Sigmar, from Pistoliers to Great Swords to Phoenix Guard to Phoenixes to like, there's been so many Band-Aid rips. I've been through it all.
When I started this faction, it was in the 3rd edition book launch. I was like, I love these Cavalier models. Like, I want these, and I want to play all of them. And I went out and bought 12 Demigryph Knights at the beginning of summer, like 2023, it must have been. And 2 weeks later, because I was like, I love these models. I'm going to run them as they're going to be in the book. I'm going to run them as like my heavy cap. I'm going to build around them. Like 2 weeks later, they're like, sorry, no rule support for these anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. They've since become just Cavaliers. I've rebased them and whatever, like, so I can keep them around. But it was like, it has been just like a slow bleed for a lot of people, especially older players, like of just losing options as you're sort of like forced into playing the new stuff, which is exciting and also disappointing. So yeah, it's tough.
So maybe we're like, let's flip the script for a second, because like we'll just constantly whinge, and like I don't want to whinge because like
it's not meant to be whinging, but it's true. I'm scared to like speak people's concerns about it, because it's a weird army to step into.
I think it's that context, right? It's like there are some models that are quite old that could go to old world. So if you're going to go get into, let's say, for example, Iron Drakes, know the world you're going into. And if you elect to go do it, or you can get them cheap on the secondhand market, amazing. You've lowered the risk, but otherwise, for me, I'm playing a lot with the humans and just like what is the newer sculpts, and not what I had from the olden days. But like Cities as a faction, how have you found them in 4th edition and this particular season? And where I might go after this, right, is I want to bring up the latest battle scroll, because I think this is really important context, because you have done actually, let me add extra context. You have done incredibly well, not just recently, but overall, right? You went 5-0 at Everwinter in December. You went 5-0 at Standoff as well. I look at some of your counterparts. I mentioned Fabian did 5-0 at the Triangle Winter War and the World Champs. Yeah. There was another player as well in the last month, Daniel Kutusa. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. Went 5-0 at Grudge Fest. So Cities has done relatively well. I think their win percentage was around 57-ish%. Yeah. So they were certainly high, but not busted, broken, making people cry like Karajan Overlord. So, like, how have you found the last 6 months for Cities? And like,
yeah, I would say like part of the reason that win rate is not higher, to be fair, is the army is like one of the more, it's not only rules intensive, like you have a lot of pieces that need to move together that you need to remember and do. It also doesn't do well if you don't do those things. So it's not just like bonus rules that are helpful. You sort of need to leverage everything they give you in order to make the army work. Meaning that like if you come into it unpracticed, or like you don't really have like, you're still learning the game, or you're a new player with Cities, like it is a really challenging army to get a lot of consistent wins out of. It takes a lot of practice to not only run its own mechanics, but also like deliver those mechanics into games and matchups with other people. Now that said, like this has always been an army that has been really consistent with, if you can do that practice and learn the game and learn the army, like you can just sort of like do anything. Like this army could sort of like stand up to like most situations and get you wins that like really a lot of other armies can't find. But it's really difficult. It really like I found it to be both very helpful for learning the game and also like limiting in some senses, because it plays very different than other armies, right? It's very support piece heavy, especially.
And I think what's really interesting as well, and you tell me as the expert, is that Cities also plays with a lot of independent pieces, where a traditional list, like you'll have 1 or 2 units with a support hero, or you'll have an absolute monster, killy thing that goes out and there might be a support piece. But, when you see the popularity of Callus and Toll, you see Darrelia and Galen Vendenst, you see Command Corps acting often independently. You've got so many little independent pieces that are a lot about trading up rather than like this synergistic piece of like hero and 1 or 2 units. And then you move your blocks, your blobs around and you try to like, kill your opponents.
I would say, I'm not sure if independent is like the way to phrase it, but like you're right that there are a lot of little pieces that move around, but they're always sort of in context or in concert with something else. The army functions around orders, right? And you can think about the orders being like, you need a hero with an order on your turn, like to do all the things. If you want to fight with 3 units, you're going to need 3 orders. So that's sort of, in my head, I've never thought of it as as like the command core is not independent. It needs the order to get the extra attacks, or it needs the order to move 3 more inches, right? Like, you're sort of always building in constraints of like all of the support pieces are like there's a lot of required units and pieces that are tied together, right? Like it's an army that in my opinion always had like its shoes tied together in order to make all the pieces work. And that was sort of, I think it's by design for the identity of the faction, which I really appreciate, right? Like you have a bunch of really normal people, or like just like Steel Helms and other like in a high fantasy setting, sort of low fantasy ideas or like individuals that have to come together to stand up to like the Gargants or the like 8 foot tall Oryx, these kinds of things, right? But if they can do that and they can work together, then they do really quite well. It's sort of like representative war scrolls, because a lot of like if you look at the base Cavalier War Scroll, like hits on 4s and wounds on 4s, and it just makes no sense when compared to other armies war scrolls, except for in context of all of your support pieces working together, timed at the right time, moving together and pre-planned in those ways. Suddenly now it's one of the better war scrolls in the game. You just have to set it up every time because it doesn't work on its own.
Yeah, independent might not have been the word I was looking for. When I think of independent, that's like Archaon or like a Mega Guy.
You just don't have anything like that, honestly. You can't just huck anything around,
But when you look at the faction, I guess what I'm saying is like, for example, you could go watch like Jeremy or even your stream at Adepticon, for example. And like when you look at the faction working, it does look like it's working way more independently than a traditional Witching faction. The way it looks is very different. Anyway, we're going on another
it's like detailed, like it's theory discussion about Age of Sigmar period. But I think it's one of the things I like about Cities is like it asks a lot, but it always has delivered, right? But it means that you always are working in really harsh constraints. Like you can't just bring Cavaliers, you have to bring Cavaliers with like 3 other things and then play them with those 3 other things at the same time. And those support is always it's not as clear as just like I casted the spell. It also like the things can be positioned in ways too. It's fascinating, but it also means that for newer players, hard army, very, very difficult.
Which is actually a nice little segue there, because like when we look at the latest battle scroll, for example, independently, okay, we have veteran cannoneers, for example. The previous battle scroll went up 30 points. Okay, I can eat that. But then when you start seeing the great cannons go up, the Fusilier Major goes up, all of a sudden that change is now a 70-point change, not necessarily just the 30-point change. So all of a sudden it's like, how invested am I in this type of archetype? And then is that now a screen that I used to have that I can no longer afford? Or does that mean that I drop a great cannon? And I think that this is kind of where, to your point, the synergy really plays, because each piece in a city's army is crucial to hit the most value out of it.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's what has made this difficult at this point. If we finally reached the point where, like, in order to deliver all the pieces you need to make the whole thing work, something's missing, right? Like one last screen is, you just can't reach over to that side of the board because you're like down one thing. And it's sort of an interesting puzzle at this point to figure out, what am I prioritizing? Like, where am I going with this? Like, how do you handle these problems with the list writing? I have not figured it out yet. There's some things I like. There's some things that are working, but I'm not super comfortable, especially after the December battle scroll, like where I want to go with it.
Which brings me to the battle scroll, like I prepared earlier. Surprise. So there's probably 2 things I want to call out here. First, obviously, is the universal stuff. And I call this out because we had some tweaks when it came to obscuring. And my last city's opponent, Chris, shout out to you, was running the Steam Tank Commander with that stupid ability that I could only hit it on 4s, I think it was.
Only
Grizzle Deck. Yep. He's doing that. Hiding behind obscuring terrain. And it was so frustrating. I had a great game with Chris, but I can't do it anymore because of obviously, Steam Tank being a war machine. As a cities player, there's been a lot of like great cannons, Fusiliers, there's certain Fusiliers. You get a lot of shooting available to you. How is the obscuring tweaks and obscuring overall played its role with cities?
I was pretty worried at the start of the GT. It was kind of like, all right, we are getting pushed into humans. The humans and historically relied on shooting, and the human shooting is already kind of like sort of activation per activation, much weaker than like Dark Shards, Iron Drakes kind of things. And then it was like, all right, we have Fusiliers to use and cannons and steam tanks, but like maybe we never can shoot anything. Like in practice, there's always something to shoot. I feel like I've discovered, like, yes, sometimes you can't fire at what you want to, but you can usually find something to shoot at, and that's gotten better, of course, right? Like there was times against like Daughters of Cain or Skaven, like armies that City struggles against sometimes. Like their war machines, their critical pieces, the bells, the carts, the cauldrons, like you couldn't do anything about them until they exposed them, and it meant that the game had to move very slowly. Now you can shoot at that stuff. So largely speaking, like Steam Tank Commander aside, I would say that the most recent change to obscuring with the war machines is generally speaking good. Yes, your cannons can have a shot at, but that's kind of okay. That's fine, because now they can fire at pretty much a lot of valuable targets at this point. And, obscuring is difficult, but we also now don't just bring shooting, so you can sort of find a way to get after units that are stuck in woods or hiding against terrain in 6 models in a way that you otherwise can't shoot at. But it's fine, always something to shoot at. And nothing in cities is so critical that if you can't use it, you like don't have a turn, right? Like you can find something to do. So interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So maybe my question then is, does that then devalue the Steam Tank Commander and or Steam Tanks in a list? Like if I was running Steam Tank Commander right now, would you drop it, or do you like where do you stand on that now?
In truth, I don't look to add Steam Tanks almost to any of my lists. I think they're cool, and they have like a role that you can play to if you're excited about it. And I think that's totally doable. There were 2 reasons why the Steam Tank was super, super good before, really over the summer. The first one was it was a great target for your Zenestra recall. So when you had the Scourge Gyran Zenestra, which you can pull for units back, that's like 280, 270 points that you would pull out of combat and be able to fire with again. Really, really valuable, especially when you can move so fast. The other problem is the Steam Tank Commander is practically unkillable in the combat phase because it'll give itself a 5-up ward on its 2-up save because it has an order. So it's way off in the corner of the board. You can charge at it because it's like on an objective with 5 control. You try to fight it. It's got a 2-up save. It all defends. It sits on the 2-up. It has a 5-up ward for itself that strikes last, and it just doesn't die. The problem is that Cities doesn't have really a 5-up ward outside of the combat phase, and now that it can be seen, like you stand outside of a Siege Army or something, and it takes 7-8 mortal wounds, like in hero phase, and then starts getting shot at by like 4 different little small piddly units. Like now it will die before the word goes off. So it's sort of just like lost to things that made it super powerful or like really usable, but that still is like a really fast 2-up save that just comes flying across the board, and you can just pull into stuff in certain circumstances. But it's a little bit like some of those flexible piece things about it. Its ability to be obscured by terrain, so it couldn't be hurt except for in combat. Losing that is a big deal. It really is for that unit especially. If anything, in Cities lost the most from that obscuring change, it's that and the Huracanum is also in trouble too.
Yeah, I haven't seen a Huracanum in ages. There was a time where I ran double Huracanum and I loved every moment of it.
Just throwing with Storm of Shemtek or whatever. You're like, here's Nyron, whatever.
More than mortals for days. Do you think, though, that like with the Steam Tank, I don't want to turn this into the Steam Tank Commander show, but there's also value in it being the distraction piece where if people can now shoot it, it means that people aren't going to attack those casualties. The other things that, like if I'm prioritizing certain pieces, go all in on the Steam Tank, and then it allows you to do other things under damage. Is there value in that, or you don't think it's enough of a trade-off?
Just not enough, I think, in this case, just in that. But you're right, like, but I don't want to lose the Steam Tank. Like, he's pretty expensive for what he does, and he's one of your orders on the board, right? Like, and you kind of need him to keep delivering, and if he can't shoot because he's stuck in combat, he only has 6 attacks that are like damage 2, right? Maybe even just 5. He's really not that strong in combat outside of just firing. So when you use all these like utility bits or like the usability of the unit is falling off, it's really not worth what it used to be. It's just interesting to go around. But you're right that it is like one of the only independent operators in the army, right? Like that guy has his own order and he goes like 17 inches and shoots and charges and fires and doesn't die for a while. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal in an army that is often usually like attached to itself. So I think it's worth a shot if somebody's excited about it, no doubt. But I've sort of fallen off of it because of the changes like according.
Yeah, I think that there's value still in the Steam Tank Commander, but I think to your point, it doesn't do what it used to do. And I think it's like, is it now surplus? I think like my opponent, Chris, for example, he's ran on the flank. So it's like, his Cavaliers coming down my front. I've got this steam tank on the flank. Do I ignore the steam tank? Then it gets into combat. It does its little steam tank things. The things that would traditionally I go fight on the flank is probably not going to handle that. So I've now got to pivot, and then it's a great time for the Cavaliers. Like there's still some play, but you're right. Like the War Machine was a big impact to them. Then the other thing, change this. Yeah.
I don't think any of the universal rules change too many things. Maybe the ritual point change is nice, right? Because you can chant off turn now to gather points without losing the -1. Just makes the priest a little more stronger. So like either of the Sinestros are nice for that reason. But otherwise, nothing is super considerably. Not much has changed anyways from the battle scroll. But I don't think too much affects cities.
Other than this, which is obviously the points and.
Why is it all red?
Weird. Yeah, lots of red. Like most factions had a balance of like red and green. You were just all red. I'm like no point. It's gyrocopters. Like what a steel helms.
Like this is it's the steel helms going up 10 points. I really am still surprised by because they were competing with Command Corps and sort of have no reason to take them if they cost the same, right? Like a reinforced steel helm unit is the same as reinforced Command Corps, and it just is not. It doesn't make that would really surprise me because I didn't know who's playing steel helms that mattered, right? Like, where was the lists that had the steel helms that drove the change? Like, who was winning with those? I don't really know.
I don't think I've seen any solo helms. Like everyone's replaced steel helms with command corps, and people are running multiple command corps to play that steel helm screening, objective controlling, obviously with additional benefits.
Yes, it's the command corps just totally outshine the steel helms in the role that's there, which is like sort of light medium infantry floating around. Like command corps just have so much upside. So if the steel helms cost the same, like no way, right? Like, we're not gonna take those. It's
plus they're cooler models, and I have to pay less.
They are cool. They are cool, and you can get really funny with the conversions too, right? Like if you have 4 command corps, as a gesture to your opponent, I think 2 of them should probably be cool conversions for them because it's really annoying to play against them. So it's fine.
But yeah, what you
conversions are useless. Yeah. I have 1 command corps that's based. I have 1 that's a conversion, and I have 1 that's a friend that I borrow from him. So I played like a 3 at most, and those are just different colors. My conversions are a lot of the tokens from other cities blotches. So like my flag guy in the my command corps is the Black Cutter Squire from a Fusilier unit. Maybe some flag conversion on it, I can't remember, because he has flags. So there's a stamp there. Another one is like a Relic Envoy is one of my the guy with the musician guy on the big bass with a bunch of those like little I had a bunch of the little Gargolians on top of there too. And there's a couple of weird like Imperial 40k models that like are standing in poses that took Sigmar and stuff pretty well. Like I think that it's a Krieg Marshal of some kind. It's the Whisper Blade in that unit too. But I had a lot of fun doing that. Especially, I did that for a lot of the old world models too. I didn't end up buying Executioners and Hammers, but I've created sort of like kit dash versions of like Steel Helm bodies or like Bretonnian Knight bodies with like Fusilier heads and big axes or big shields or something to like look like they're keep the Freak Guild vibe going, but not have to spend money on dying models that are lower detail too. So it's been fun to do that. But either way, the points updates are very weird for cities. We don't sit. This was surprising because our win rate was hitting like 52, like well within sort of a normal range of winning. I think part of the problem is Games Workshop has really good data about which units are performing. Like they can go into pretty good detail about what's the win rate when a unit is included in the army, what's the win rate when it's not included in the army. And so they have a tendency to, like, when there are a handful of cities players that really overperform, the units they rely on are, it's very clear that they're overperforming in those lists for a reason. And then they can identify those specifically and bring them down, right? And then there are some obvious ones here. Like the cannons were doing quite well and they went on 10 points, right? Like that makes sense too. Cows and Toll is interesting to see them go up, because for a long time, a lot of the humans were going down, like down, over and over, almost as an incentive to bring us away from the old world models and start playing some of the newer things, or try to find a role for the newer stuff. And then now suddenly is starting to inch back up after the rest of the army has cohered around this game plan. So it makes a difference. You were usually down a screen now, right? Like this is across the normal list right now. This would probably be 60, 70, 80 points. Yeah, it's a lot. You have to switch some stuff around. Big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just having a look at some of your units. I think that's the challenge. And if you look at some other factions, it's that internal balance, right? Because the external balance, when you look at like the win percentages of cities versus other factions, you were not dominating the 5-0s. Yes, you've got a few 5-0s and, consistently done well, but you haven't been this crazy 60% blowing people off the park. It's not like the entire faction is broken. And when you look at the rules, like the rules are fine. Like it's not like you've got this absolutely undercosted thing that's like carrying you. But when you look at the internal balance of like, when was the last time the Free Guild wizard on Griffin, like with the Magic Griffin, when was the last time we saw Luminarchs doing incredibly well? People running Flagellants, people running the Sorcerer on Dragon, or you know what I mean? Like there's so many units in this book that are not being used, or at least aren't doing very well from the competitive point of view. And it was very clear that you've got some outstanding options. And I think this is the challenge, is like, how do I think about this list? I was running 3 cannons. My cannons also had a Warhawk. You know what? I still love them. I'm going to keep with them, but it means I need to turn one of those command corps into steel helms. Or a Lily. I need to.
And it's not operating the same as it used to. And it means every time you lose one of these things, it's like, because it all like links together. Like when one piece disappears, all the other ones are weaker because of its disappearance, right? Like I have one less screen, which really matters, because it means those cannons are like one turn less away for being tagged or taken out of the game. Like really the things, when these points go up and you lose the pieces, you like the whole economies of scale become kind of a problem for some of these lists, especially the more we start to rely on the humans like that. It's hard to flex into other things when you need to spend a lot of points to make these humans like rightfully the better units in the book as they stand. It's just interesting.
Yeah, and I was talking to Fabian, who also he's 5-0 with cities. He's been running the KO Profiteers Regiment of Renees, which was a great unit. It was like, even at the World Championships, where it was easily the number 1 Regiment of Renown. I think there was 14 or 20 of them at the World Champ, so like highly represented. And I was talking to Fabian. I said, Fabian, hey, before we go live, I want to show you a list at some point. Like, are you still running it? And he said, yeah. Like I still see incredible value, even though the points increased. I still see value for what it brings. So it's like, cool. Where will I get the points elsewhere? Like, where do I trade off? And it's that one support hero, and I'm a little bit more conservative with my orders, or it's that one less screen, or it's that one less reinforcement, or whatever it might be.
He's totally right. And Fabian is a amazing player who joined cities in like the last 6 months or so, making conversions of all of his models so they're not Free Guild, but are rather like old wood elves of different varieties. They look amazing. I would not to my taste at all. I agree with you. But
I'm the other way. I turn dwarves and elves into humans.
That's what I've been doing as well. Yeah. Fabian also like had developed what is actually like far and away probably one of the most unique builds from where you can go with this right now, and it includes that Skyfort Profiteers, they're called. It really, like, for a player like Fabian, who is really knowledgeable about the whole game, is very experienced, very smart when he plays, very thorough. Like, this city's, because of all the options, because of all the interlocking pieces, because of all the choices you get when you're like at the board, like it gives him every tool that you need to win every game, right? Like there's always a way through a game with something like this. The rules are not like overpowered, like blow up your opponent, but like the combination of like retreating and 5-up wards and model recursion and moving 3 inches after deep strike, like these kinds of things like really stack up to give you sort of a toolbox that no other army could do. And a list like Fabian's like just 100% like leans into that, which really I think shows like the strength of what makes this kind of a really special faction to play and to get good at, because you end up having the ability to do anything, but you have to set it up right. Like, and it gets harder the less units you have to, of course. So interesting.
I want to pause on the points question for a second, because after this, I've actually got a couple of lists, right? So we can actually bring this to life, because I guess the person who is running a traditional list, right? Like if I'm running the triple cannons, veteran cannoneers, got the Fossilia Major, like the traditional, what's been popular in the last 3-6 months, you're all in the same spot. Everyone else who was like running something off meta, you love your Talia, you love like your Fossilias, you're running something, you weren't impacted. Your list is the same. Like, don't worry about it. So like, be free. But this Pontifex, now Scourge of Gyran brought out a Pontifex. It got changed 3 months ago. Got changed again. It keeps getting changed. Probably a couple of questions. Thoughts on the change? And do you have any thoughts between soggy versus non-soggy Pontifex?
So, did you play against the initial release Scourge and Grand Pontifex ever?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Like
I wanted to punch my opponent in the face.
We just like 5 minutes ago were like, oh, there's never been like an overpowered like ability in cities that did like dominates. It's like, no, this is actually just, I mean, or just to explain it, when the Scourge and Grand Pontifex was added, you know, she's power 2 crease, so she's like rolling twice, and she got this War Scroll Prayer, right, which is sort of on the right here. But the first 2 are not important at all. It's Salvation that was unbelievable, like game breaking, to be honest. Like I played 2 games and I was kind of like, really, maybe there's no reason I should ever lose a game while I have this ability. It's wild. When on release, it was a little different. When you chanted that prayer, you picked 3 human units anywhere on the battlefield, in combat, not in combat, visible, whatever, and you pulled them back to Pontifex, and they were set up again, wholly within 12 of her, with the only stipulation that they are not in combat. So 3 inches outside of an opponent's units, they just can't charge, but they can shoot. That's nice too. And the real kicker of it was that it was almost guaranteed, because you re-rolled 1s on that prayer. So if you rolled it on your opponent's turn, you had 4 points banked. You rolled a 1, you just roll the dice again, and certainly you won't roll a 1 again or anything like that. You 35 out of 36 times, you pull 800 points wherever they are on the board and reposition them. And early in the game, it meant that you could just like dominate the board, take all the objectives, take a really bad trade, and then immediately recall everything that you had exposed. And then late game, it was like an unbelievable ability to move Command Core around to just make it impossible for your opponent to score, or like move your shooting, right? Your cannon's tagged? No, it wasn't. Actually, it's over here now. It's going to shoot you anyway. So your Fusiliers got thrown over like 12 inches behind your opponent, and then they moved 3 more. So now they're taking the objective behind their lines and firing back into combat that they were tagged in. It just was unbelievable. Like I described it as just like a design mistake, because it was too much. The city's player could do whatever they wanted, and then sort of the opponent had to like hope it just didn't go light for them and sort of try to drown them in pressure early on, and it just, or like make them out not score well. They changed it in, I think, predictably, to just being, I can't remember what it was before this most recent change. It was something along the lines of like, you can take 3 units that are not in combat, or like there were a lot more stipulations about who you could pull, and it functionally neutered the ability. Like it had to,
and you could only do it in your turn as well. Like
the only from your turn, yeah, which made it not nearly as useful as it was. Like the most important thing was to interrupt and pray and pull it back on your opponent's turn. And then, yeah, I looked at it and I was like, all right, I just can't play around these restrictions. So let's just like go in a different direction. So they've sort of split the baby with the most recent change, which is now it's 1 unit anywhere on the board outside of 12 inches of her can be pulled back to her. A really cool ability, like genuinely, like that is pretty unique and interesting and powerful. She still has 270 points. And I'm not sure that there's a unit in Cities of Sigmar which warrants this ability, right? Because if you're bringing her, the other abilities are, I don't think personally, like justify bringing her as opposed to the other Pontifex for reasons we'll talk about in a little bit. Like the Hallowed Ground and Fervent Prayers are not things that you can get a lot of use out of a lot. The Hallowed Ground's interesting, but never really has proven invaluable to me. And one unit being recalled is not worth losing a second copy of that unit. And so I don't know if this is enough for me to start taking her again. Yeah, what's like the one, like it would be a unit of Cavaliers you would recall across the board back home. But even then, it's like, well, you already have Cavaliers like you're charged in combat, so you don't really need them to reposition. And it's definitely not worth giving up a second unit of Cavaliers to take this priest to do it, right? Like it sort of is not. It's not enough, I think, to justify it right now. And I think the points go down. Maybe there's something to look at, but I'm not sure about it.
And I think that's the interesting piece there, right? Is that traditionally where you've seen this play out often is like the Cavaliers and the Cavalier Marshal. Traditionally, the Cavalier Marshal will have the prayer tome and well, I mean not traditionally, but like one common combination is giving it the tome. Then the tome will give them prayers, and then they get all the charge benefits. Then they yeet themselves out, and you can still do that and like take out your Cavaliers. Amazing. But now you got your Cavalier Marshal that is going to die. Or if you've been running 2 units of Cavaliers, then you're sacrificing. And that partially goes back to my question around the Steam Tank Commander, because that is one solo model. Mm-hmm. Like, do you want to be yeeting and moving it around?
Yeah. And this is, I think, you're right. And I think that there's also a problem with the Scourge and Cavaliers that require the other Pontifex to be used effectively, which makes it very, very difficult to take them together. But I think that this would be the one situation where the Steam Tank maybe makes a reoccurrence again, because you kind of need it to shoot, I think, to get its value. So if you can pull out of combat and fire again, that's not bad. We can take that for sure, I think. Maybe I will try that in a practice game in the future here, just to see if there's something to do with that there. Missions are very wide still too, right? Like this GHB especially, like although you don't need to be winning primary every turn to win a game, it really helps to be able to go across the entire board because the objectives are kind of shoved way out wide, right? But I think largely speaking, even with this change, the Scourge and Pontifex doesn't fit the rest of the core build in a meaningful way. So it would take like a full revision of what your game plan is in order to bring her. So she doesn't fight fit in some of these other, like some of the typical things you're going to start with if you're looking to sort of like come to grips with where the faction is right now.
And you know what? Like there might be enough changes here that makes the Pontifex points go, you know what? Let's chuck a Talia in here, or let's go that Free Guild Marshal on Griffin, or let's like rethink about a particular build, because yes, we do know a certain style and the style is the style, but has there been enough changes and points that makes you revisit something? And I'm not saying that the Free Guild General on Griffin or Marshal on Griffin is like the next OP thing, but I think these are the types of moments in time where it makes you re-question and say, am I just going down a rabbit hole and trying to, like, there's been enough changes over the last 3 to 6 months that should make me rethink about, do I want to stick with this?
Yes. And we'll look at some of the lists that are sort of breaking at the seams, meaning that we should look for those little crazier things. And I've tried to find a few, and I'm going to keep looking, but I haven't settled on it yet. I'm already sitting here, you're mentioning like, okay, wait, what if I take a Free Guild Marshal on Griffin and I send him every turn as a missile, like across the board, 15, 17 inches or whatever, and then I pull him back. Like now he's not going to die. What is that, 4/8? I don't know if it's enough, but it certainly is something different. And it sort of, I think it warrants a lot of like pretty weird new builds that maybe can find something that's going to work for the next couple months before something else changes, of course. Let's shake out. But yeah, it's interesting.
And you know what? You could put that Grizzled Veteran on the Free Guild General. On.
That's where I was going like that too. Again, that it's so painful because then I'm like, okay, I have the Grizzled Veteran. Now I've given up Cosmopolitan Leader. So now I have wounding on 4s on every single one of my human models in the entire game, which feels again like I can't give that up ever. And maybe I need to get my head out of that, like out of the sand and say something has to be different. But it's sort of so it's a challenging place to be.
Before I start bringing up some lists, right? Is there anything else you want to talk about with the changes?
No, I think I would just highlight like it is sort of making it hard to get all the pieces you need in order to make things really sing together without also like sort of compromising in ways that like are going to lose you games. And so one of the things that's difficult about this is like Cities was an army that I could bring to most tournaments and always feel like there was a way to win that game. And it's getting to the point where like I'm not feeling like that anymore. I go on a really wide mission with an army that I don't think I stacked up against well, and I'm sort of scratching my head going, oh, there's like doom is approaching. And that has never been a feeling that I sort of like have had playing this army. It's something to get used to, I think, right? Like it's becoming a little bit more traditional, like other armies, in addition to like maybe some new ideas are coming around, but it plays a little bit more like with true weaknesses, which is something that was not my experience with this army for the last 18 months. Right?
So how are you thinking about that? You know what? Let's bring up let's bring up the list, right? Because I think this is kind of where we start to unpack this, because you're right. Some of these units have been priced to a point where you might have lost a screen in the last season. Now you've lost another screen, or you've lost another thing, and it's now like, how do I I'm just doubling down on the same thing, or do I revisit? So you want to start here with what you call the core pieces. And yes, folks, you can see that it's not a 2,000 point list. It's what Dylan wants as a core. Tell me more about his core. Why is it the core? And does this mean that every single list starts at 1,500 points? Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, that is kind of like a more traditional cities list right now. This is part of the challenge that we're discussing, is like you kind of need, if you want to go with the cannons, which I think is still like a way that a lot of people are interested in playing the army, because the cannons are cool and they've solved some problems that cities list otherwise have with just having like one red and one and with human units. This is where you probably start. If it isn't where you finish, that's fine. But it will at least show you the edges of like what your problem is. And also genuinely, like this is a really strong list. Like this bullies a lot of people and has a lot of combat potential, a lot of output, and will teach you a lot of nice things about the game too. But sort of is very demanding on points in order to get to the point where it all works together, because of the way that like all these pieces are interstitched and all went up in points, right? So this is now, in truth, this like slide is a bit of a lie, because I've actually never personally played a 3 cannon list. They just never appeal to me. I think like I have found the cannons to be, just for conceptually speaking, like sort of something that like maybe isn't flexible enough that I had been taking it when I was sort of looking at human lists. I usually took like 20 Fusiliers with the Pontifex, but I would say like very safely, and I would also endorse it, like this is a strong core and this works really, really well. And so for anybody who wants to sort of like start to slam their head against what writing the list looks like this is where you're going to end up starting. And the reason is because all these things like sort of need to package together, or else they fall off like a critical effectiveness point. And there's sort of like 2 pieces to what's going on here. The first piece is like you have a frontline castle in like two units of Cavaliers and the Pontifex, and they sort of have to move together. So the new Scourge of Gran Cavaliers, which I think we'll talk about later or look at the scroll especially, they have an ability that is unusual for cavalry, where essentially if on a turn where they did not charge, but they are in combat, they can roll a dice, and on a 4-up or a 3-up, they count as having charged for that turn. Super powerful because all of their weapons are damage 1, and that'll double the damage because now it's at 2. And even more important, because any unit in cities that has charged can receive an order to get 1 more attack, right? So you're going from 2 attacks, damage 1, to 3 attacks, damage 2 on those Cavaliers, even if your opponent charges you. So they have just like way more sustain than Cavaliers used to before, in addition to hitting on a slightly better number too. They also have a really cool like interaction with the Free Guild Cavalier Marshal. When they make that roll to charge in combat, they also target the Cavalier Marshal. If they succeed the roll, he also counts as having charged, and he has an ability written on his war scroll. Once per game, he selects himself if he has charged, and a Cavalier unit that has charged, and gives both units strikes first. So they have a cute little like pseudo Bellicor chosen, but without any crit mortals that you can trigger on like what is comparatively kind of a small price package. The problem is that all of these things need to go together. One of the problems with the Free Guild Cavaliers in the Scourge of Garan war scroll version is that in cities, one of your most important durability sort of abilities is your Fiber Forge. And usually the army has access to that almost all the time. If your unit has not charged in cities and is within 12 inches of a hero, they can give themselves strikes last in order to receive a Fiber Forge. So your old Cavaliers were like almost unkillable as long as they didn't charge, because they would be able to give themselves a 5-up board and be 30 wounds on a 3-up or 2-up save, -1 to wound, 5-up board. Just disgustingly durable. They just can't do any damage afterwards. They're stuck in combat forever. If you charge, though, you don't have access to that ward save. So your Cavaliers, if you want to use that in combat on your opponent's turn, if they make that charge roll, they can't receive the ward save. But the Pontifex fixes that entirely, because the base Pontifex Force Roll includes a 12-inch bubble prayer for a persistent 5-up board on human units. And that was something that, like, in context of the new Cavaliers, we started bringing the old Pontifex because she's what made them work. Now you can fight on your opponent's turn with charging, your unit can strikes first, and they don't lose the ward save as well. So you get everything you want, so long as you have Curve and the Cavaliers and the Cavalier Marshal. And at this point now, I'd put, quick math is like 800 points into this brick in the middle. I need 20 points on top to do it all, +1 to wound, free up with the Cosmopolis and Leader, right? So all those pieces together really make quite a durable front line. The problem is it's all Rend 1, and it all has to be within 12 inches of Pontifex. So you don't have a lot of reach with this, right? Like, if you send one of those Cavalier units out, he's not coming home because he doesn't have a ward save anymore. And if he charges in combat, he definitely doesn't have a ward save because he's not within 12 of her too. But cannons are Rend 2, and cannons shoot a long way, and they express power all over the place. So your opponent has to come to you. You can do damage where you need it. You can address monsters. You can address Spray of Saves with that Rend 2. You end up backing up this castle with 3 cannons, which will just pepper for everything as long as you're fighting it. The problem is that then also costs you 330 points in order to buy all 3 cannons, because that's where the critical mass is on the efficiency, because you also take the veteran cannoneer sub-faction, which then makes them reroll on dice. And if they didn't reroll on dice, they would not be worth their cost. So you need all of the above. And at this point, every unit is a human unit. So you need Diffusal Major and Ogre Warhol, because now whatever he shoots at, a Malarmy is +1 to hit. Right? So all these things stitched together to be like a pretty good plan. It's just this used to cost 1,200 points. Now it costs 1,450. And that means that the remaining 500 points has to be very intentional, because you're now this is a great center, but if you need to go fight on an objective that's not within range of Pontifex, you're in trouble, right? His weaknesses are starting to show some age or some wear there. It's tough.
Yeah, this is a really solid core. I know a lot of questions, right? But this is a really solid core. And for anyone who's played Intercities, and I'm not going to say this is the only way, because I don't think you need to play great cannons. I think there's a very big world out there where you don't take any great cannons and you play into other spaces.
Absolutely right. Yep.
The challenge here, or the opportunity here, is that the great cannons create they dictate the momentum of the game, right? Because there's only a few units that can outshoot you. I'm thinking catapults, from OBR and cities. Gets my rockets from my cannons and my rockets from Hellsmiths. But outside of that, you have a lot of range to dictate. I can just sit here and shoot you off the board, and I'm cool with that. And then this build out my Cavaliers. My Cavaliers will go do the thing, and I'll pick the fight when I'm ready to pick the fight. So if you don't deal with me, then I'm just going to shoot you off the board and take out your critical pieces, and I'm cool with that. It's who holds the objectives, who does the battle tactics, blah blah blah.
It becomes more difficult. Yes, it just stretches poorly. It's very there's a middle column that is just devastating. So you're on a dense mission, or you just get everything goes right, you're there, but you lose that side objective, and there may be nothing that goes over there because all of this needs to be working together. And that means you just lost 8 differential points at the end of the game, which might have made the difference, because they just take 2 points for 4 turns on that. It's stop. It's very hard to handle this situation. But I would endorse this list right now, right? It sort of is. It's a very sort of. I think it not only plays well, it covers its own weaknesses, right? Those cannons deal with the hard targets. Those Cavaliers are very sticky for combat armies to deal with, and it takes some practice to figure out how these pieces should be played. But you can get a lot of mileage out of this. It also sort of shows, I think, nicely the way that we were talking about. The pieces are independent, but they all have to sort of stitch together. And if you're missing any of this piece, it does not work even close. These are not marginal improvements by having the Ogre Warhol. You kind of need him entirely, or you really need Pontifex Sinestra if you take the other Cavaliers. You need all of this. So it's sort of, the packages are very natural, but they it just means that when things become more expensive, not only do you lose units, but also means everything else is sort of affecting less things to make it less efficient as well.
And by the way, just to defend myself again, this is not what I was talking about with independent. This is clearly a very dependent list.
Exactly,
I'm
right.
thinking when you've got Talia and Darrelia and you've got Garbage, he's like,
Slice up garbage everywhere that can, yes.
I like, okay, yeah,
That's like the swamp list I call it, because it's just like nothing is important to me, and all of it is incredibly annoying to deal with. And frankly, like, this is maybe where this army is going again. Like, I might be playing swamp lists because I prefer that. It always gives me a tool. But yes, that is a sort of, this I think shows the way that you need everything to work together in cities. Like, if you pile out 12 of Zenestra and your opponent is not very forgiving and like lets you be like, I made a mistake, please let me move back in, you lose the Cavaliers. Like, they got it. Like, that's it. Everything needs to be sort of manipulated or orchestrated correctly, or else like it will fall apart. It can make it tough, but it's good with practice. You can make it happen, and then you start to know the limitations. Like, how far can I really go away from her? Like, where does the Fusel Manger have to stand? These kinds of questions. But this is your core. You're going to start a basic list with 3/4 of it done, which is wild, right? Like, especially at least put this direction.
I got a wild idea. Before I go to the other lists, I've got a wild idea. I need to bring up. I'm bringing back the old city. I'm bringing my old cities knowledge, and you're going to slap me down and tell me other idiots. What if we drop the Pontifex? You talked about some of the limitations. You talked. I know I've already people already in the chat going, "What's he doing? He's a madman. One too many destruction." All right, hear me out. As a destruction player, come back in.
Absolutely.
What if, like, you talk about the limitations and the challenges with, like, the ward, for example, with the Pontifex? What if we swapped out the Pontifex for the Luminarch, given that it has a passive 6-up aura that's wholly within 12, and it's got a better movement than the Pontifex? It's a thought. Don't rip me a new one.
I'm looking up. I remember there's a reason why I hate this, and I think it only affects. They have a 6-up aura. Okay. I mean, is it that it's the same cost? It's actually more expensive in points than even she is, with a lot less value.
Wait, what else? There's a laser. Has a laser beam. Has a laser beam.
Yeah, this is what I mean too. Is like, if you want to play cool shit in cities, like, please do, because like you could win a game with. You can win multiple games with this. It's like, that's a good idea. It's just sort of like, if you get too funny with it, you start to jeopardize everybody else, right? But like, maybe a 6-up ward is enough. It genuinely is less of a ward, but it's an idea, right? And like, I would like some ideas. It's truly like sort of where I'm going to take this away. So anybody, please feel free to message me ideas if you've seen something crazy like a Luminarch laser instead of a Pontifex in the center of my Regal Cavalier unit. But we'll find out.
That's interesting. Or even like the Luminarch without the wizard on top, right? You know, if you
let's have it. Yeah, I can do it. I hadn't thought about that, actually. And you can covering fire with the laser? I wonder if they changed that. I remember some people talking about it. You can covering fire with the laser and deal D3 in a line to multiple things because it used the shooting attack or something. I may be just lying through my teeth, but that was something funny, weird.
Just one attack hits on a 2, so you can still do it. Not bad. Anyway, that's just me throwing random things into the flames. But I think this goes back to my original point, is like, there's been enough changes now over the last 3 to 6 months where maybe it's time to experiment again. Maybe it's time to play with the Free Guild Marshal on Griffin.
Told me how I'm stuck in my ways, but you're right. Like, I resist it, and then I go, but I actually need new ideas too. So it's worth thinking about. But here's your 1,500 points that I think if you deviate away from it, like, even with one piece, you might as well drop all of it, right? Like, if you're not going to take Pontifex and Extra, you might as well not take the Sog Cavaliers. You should take the other ones or replace them with something else or something. But for now, this is sort of like our cookie cutter basic idea where we start here right now.
This is a very easy to get started list, and it will do well. Like, this is a very easy list to pilot. It will do relatively well. It's tried and tested.
Totally.
And I think this is kind of where we go, right, okay, well, like, how do we start to bring this to life? And, you know, when I was asking Discord for questions, you know, they've got real curiosities around things like, you know, how you introduce the Dark Elves. Like, do we even need to have 2 units of Cavaliers? Do I split them and have 2 units of 5 and 110 for a bit more board presence? You know, how do we bring in something like Gotrek or like like there's so many ways you can start to pick and play around. Do we start bringing in gyrocopters and stuff, right? Like there's so many things you can start to play around with now that you've got a solid base. But this is actually like a tried and tested list. This was your 5-0 list that you did at Everwinter. Everwinter, was that pre or post Battle Scroll? Just
It was before the Battle Scroll. I'm not sure if this, I can't tell. The points may not be, it was the list structure. Yeah, because the Command Core 170. So this is before the Battle Scroll is when this came out. And even then I was feeling like I was running out of resources. Like I could sense some of the problems. And then once the Battle Scroll clicked over, it was like, oh, for instance, that Command Core, I can't afford it anymore. So we have to find the points somewhere else. It gets trickier. And it's already sort of showing, like, one of the things is we have that same core on the front line, right? Like, it's playing through Pontifex, who is giving that ward save to those Cavaliers again. So you can have just like this really fast front line that can push hard and is a really sticky problem for combat armies because they get struck first on by at least one of them. And they very durable, sort of 3 of 5 safe and a reasonable combat profile, right? So you have that core of the Cavaliers. And then I had mentioned earlier that I find the cannons to be limiting in some ways, right? They're very liable to be tagged. They cost a lot because they cost the subfaction in addition to all 3 cannons. It's a lot of space you have to make sure that you're covering, right? Like get the cannons arranged and fire with them. And then this is before the obscuring changes, meaning that like those carts and stuff, you couldn't fire it anyway. So the cannons could shoot anything valuable. You kind of were just like, all right, I guess I can use my secondary damage. The executioners were something that like, executioners were something I used to play very early in the edition. They were sort of shown as like, it was very obvious that they could perform something that nothing else in the army could do. So an army with a lot of red 1, and this unit does just a preposterous number of mortal wounds on the charge, right? So their profile is like, when they charge, they have free attacks. And when they charge, they crit on 5s, and they're crit mortal 1 damage. 61 attacks means that 20 of those dice are 5s and 6s. You did 20 damage. Like, you charge with their executioners, they did 20 damage. Very, very valuable, because there's some stuff that you don't kill otherwise. So the idea with this list was usually using the speed of Dawnbringer Crusade if it's like appropriate. You just shove those Cavaliers right on your opponent's doorstep, and you use the small unit of Cavaliers and the unit of Command Corps to sort of like push your flanks a little bit and give space where your executioners stay hidden or safe in the middle. And then over the course of like the next turn or two, your opponent tries to deal with the Cavaliers, inevitably doesn't quite make enough ground, takes a lot of damage for it, and then the executioners are like right on the doorstep with a 9-inch move and maybe a 3d6 charge to just like sweep up whatever the problem is that's left with 20 damage flat, and then you just spread out and cover the table. And it works well. It works quite well, actually. Like those Cavaliers like always impress me, to be honest. Like I always find like I'm really surprised on the damage they do to the opponent on their turn, right? Like that's when they really shine, is that they're charging when they are tagged in combat. They have a funny strikes first, which can have like some really, really swingy moments about like changing the outcome of a game entirely. I had one against an IDNF player where they managed to cash out some Morsar guard that had charged. On that 4-out, they hit the strikes first and killed 4 out of 6 of that anti-cavalry unit. And it just meant that one of the opponent's hammers is just eviscerated before you even get there. And it's a problem that the combat army can't handle. The issue is like that Command Corps on its own alone is not enough wounds to like fight against a real dedicated combat piece on the edge. They used to be when you had 3 of them and they would rotate in and out and you always had the brazier in the right place. But with only one, they just don't do what they used to do. And the 5-man Cavaliers, I just went cold on. They just like they would activate second, but they would have lost 3 models and it's like 6 attacks. It just didn't make sense anymore. But I would prefer to turn them into Command Corps. I definitely don't have the points anymore, right? But this list was very good at fighting straight up the center, and then I would just cross my fingers and hope that was enough to break out to the edges to fix the problem later on. I think there is one. I don't know if I had Master of the Paths for this event. I was trying some other stuff. I think I had Restless Energy. It worked well, worked fine, because we were going straight down the middle, but I think that I would... Master of the Paths is a safe choice for most lists, because you can kind of score the first 2 of it pretty often, like target, without worrying about your opponent. But I think I would recommend like Raffle Cycles is a really good cities tactic as well, because you have like 5 drops. So if your opponent doubles you, which they usually do at some point, come underdog, get those like half units to fight. Tricky with cannons, but otherwise this list was showing a little bit of wear over the course of the event, but if 5-0, like I can't complain about that. It worked really, really well and showcased the strength of those Cavaliers straight down the line, right? It's a really good core as long as you bring all the pieces for it.
You made a comment really early on, and I'd actually forgotten about this. While you were talking and I was intently listening, you made a comment about, no, I swear, I was listening. I was multitasking. So not men can multitask here. You mentioned the Cavaliers, and I'm looking at those Cavaliers going, right, if I was going to drop 5 Cavaliers, like, how cool would it be if I get something really fast? Like, and I was having a look going, right, okay, I remember days in 3rd edition where I loved running gyrocopters, having a couple of little idiot gyrocopters to take objectives and flank and be annoying. Or like, what about Dark Riders? Or what about like even chariots? I remember running around bloody chariots and just spamming chariots across the board. And like, frustratingly, I've just realized, and you made a comment about the points of like your dark elves and even your dwarves, like your gyrocopter is 120, your gyro bomber is 120. Dark shards blew me away when I'm looking at, was it Dark Riders? Dark Riders are 170. I'm like, in what world does Dark Riders go for 170? Versus a Cavalier at 160.
There's very you're completely right. And the other problem is, in order to make a lot of that stuff work, you have to invest other stuff, right? Like Dark Riders wound on the 4s. So suddenly you're like, all right, I'm taking a slightly faster unit that can't get a ward save on my turn because it's not human for Pontifex. It has a free up bounce out of combat. That's cool, but it doesn't happen every time. And I think you want the Dark Rider because it's going to bounce away and then it's going to charge again the next turn. The Cavaliers just charge every turn with a free up save in combat because that's what they do now. They just grind. And it's just like you're scratching your head going like, there's not a real role for this really expensive unit that just doesn't have meaningful upside outside of the rest of this and doesn't synergize with it, right? Once I've got all the human support pieces to make the human units work, there's the other stuff doesn't fit in a meaningful way. Dark Shards, for instance, are great units, but you need to have Master of Ballistics. And if you take Master of Ballistics, you don't get Cosmopolis and Leader, or whatever the +1 to wound on human units, which means now your Cavaliers are like 1/3 less damage across the line. So 600 points of your stuff just went down to like enable 300 points to shoot a little better. It just all doesn't. It's so awkward or some uncomfortable with the trade-offs in trying to make all these pieces fit together. And that's really the reason why like Dark Riders used to be like 150 points, and there was a real world where like these points, like the point changes on this list occur. And I can change both Cavalier, like the small Cavaliers and the Command Corps, into 2 Dark Riders. And I'm very happy with that. But they do not cost 150 anymore. They cost the same as a Command Corps. And if I've got human stuff, the Command Corps is just better.
That's wild. Did you know it's wild, just to rub salt into the wound? As a Daughters of Cain player, I have my Doomfire Warlocks. Doomfire Warlocks are 3 health, a wizard, for 150. 150.
Yep.
I get
all cheaper. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of the cities book is incredibly deep. And we benefited from that for a long time because there was always something to pivot to, especially with all the old world stuff. You could find something that did the job before. And especially when we were trying to compensate for the fact that all the humans wounded on 4s and had to charge one time into combat. Like there were big problems with the human units to start. So they made those other units very valuable because they did stuff that the humans didn't do. Now the humans do everything. And those old world models got more expensive than the humans, and you were becoming less efficient by taking them because they don't have a slot. I don't like want to speculate. Sometimes I wonder like how coherent of a company James Workshop is in order to like execute a plan where they're like forced like making these units obsolete, but like they certainly don't feel any pressure to make the old world models valuable in the game. And I can understand if they were like, well, we really want people to play free build stuff because that's our model for our game. And that's what we want this army to be like. And the other stuff's going away eventually anyway. So maybe this is our soft parachute to be like, let them go. Dark Riders.
Well, it's a weird time. I'm going to put my little tinfoil hat on for a second. By the way, like what led me down to this rabbit hole is like, for example, we talked about the mono build and the predictability, but I think part of this challenge is like your hand is kind of forced where it's like, I'd love to run some gyro bombers, or some gyrocopters, have some little flanking skirmishy pieces.
Yes.
They're 120 for 5 health.
They're simply too expensive for the role. Correct. The role needs to exist and you just can't buy that. Yeah.
I was thinking they're going to be like 80 points, 80 points, 90 points.
like, okay, like sure, like then there's a bit of a role to play here. But the fact that they're 120, like for 40 extra points getting into Cavaliers, like I'm crazy not to. But then because of that, like the points, obviously, to your point, like I was just looking at some of the Dark Elves, I was looking at some of the Dwarves. But to speculate here for a second, putting that tinfoil hat on for a second, it's really interesting, right? Because the lore is pointing us to Grumdy coming back to unite the Dwarves, right? Caradron Overlords, they've always been onto the side. We now have some type of rumored unification of Fire Slayers and Dwarves, and what that looks like, and if it happens, who knows? But what we do know is that Dwarves are in the old world now. They have their own technical book. Dark Elves don't. So that's going to be a really interesting one, because while the High Elves are out, the Dark Elves are not. They are a renegade, like, legend faction. So what this means and the longevity, I don't know. And will that Band-Aid get ripped off when Daughters of Cain get a new book and Malarian or Malekith come back? And do we have the Dark Elves for another Hulot? But like then what does cities look like, for example? Let's say hypothetically they ripped the Band-Aid off and took the Dwarves out of the book.
I operate with the assumption that they're probably gone with the next book. I think they may not be, but it's sort of like you've already said a soft goodbye at this point, because it's really hard to justify taking the models at all, right? You can play them. It just never seems to work out as well. Like it's not optimal. It's usually what ends up happening. And that's just that just means that part of the army is kind of disappearing even before the models are not available in a lot of ways. And a lot of people are upset about it. I think it makes sense. This is sort of the army you played when you want to play your cool stuff from before, and sort of to have it not only be knowing it's leaving and to have it not be very good in game too is sort of like, all right, we're putting these down over time.
I will say I'm not as aggressive as you are. Like, as you look at this, you look at the list, right? Assassin, old. Battle Mage, old. Battle Mage and Hurricanum, old. Battle Mage and Griffin, old. Luminarch, old. Fleetmaster, old. Cogmaster, old. Dreadlord and Black Dragon, old. Like, you'll lose 60% of your list. Like, sorry, your options.
Yeah, it's good to, yeah. That's
it's a lot of old models.
It's a lot. Yeah, I think a real guess is to say, like, they give one dwarf melee unit, one dwarf shooting unit, one dark elf melee unit. They just consolidate them into one option that you can take if you have those models you want to play. That is sort of maybe is the direction it goes. But either way, it's sort of the reality of it is those options are really not on the table. And especially the more the army plays like this, where like all the pieces need to be working together, like the random splash in of the old world model is sort of becoming really hard to justify. Even the executioners, I think, in this list, like, I don't know if I would continue to take them because they were just not performing. They would, sometimes they would charge targets and it would have a 5-up ward. They wouldn't finish it off. And then they're like by far the most fragile piece in the list. It would just be kills by that unit that they failed to kill, despite it needing to be my sort of haymaker. It's just getting harder to justify including them. I'm sort of curious to bring hammerers. I've loved them for a long time, and it's sort of a Ren 2, like, just truly comical amount of damage you can get out of them sometimes, but they only move 4 inches in a book that has, like, a GHB that has objectives that are 5 inches from the board edge. Like, it's hard to justify bringing these things.
And what's hard as well, back to the hammerers, is their 180, which is the same price as your Ken Corpse.
Yes.
The 10.
It's they used to be 150 at one point, and they were unbelievably cool at 150 with Field Sergeant. Like, they were gross and way too efficient. They have been taking weird, like, I would say I haven't seen hammers in lists since the beginning of summer, so like 3 battles ago, and they've taken a 10-point hit at almost every single time. It's sort of like a bit of a meme to be like, oh, hammers went up 10 again, right? Sort of, they were too strong and they're off the table too, right? You're running out of options on the sides. It's coming. This is what we mean when, like, this is the core. Like, this is what feels very natural. And it's very hard to imagine breaking from these things, for better or worse, right? It works very good, and it works in a way cities hadn't in the past. It's very blunt force. Like, you can go fight people, which is not something it could always do, but it really requires a lot of your opportunity cost is built into making this stuff work. And if you don't take these pieces, you're in trouble because it's not going to stick together in the right way. Like, the glue disappears.
It's a hard slog. Like, I'm sitting here going, right, like, let me prove Dylan wrong. Like,
Like I'm going right. Okay, Drake Spawn guys. Like right. I'm gonna let's. No. But like, hear me out. I'm like,
I like watching. No, I like it.
but it's like it 190. I'm like, what? So
For less games, look Cavaliers.
yeah, they're less damage than the Cavaliers. There's
Warlords, they can't charge in combat. There's just no reason. All right, like it's like heartbreaking often to be like, I just can't have a reason to bring these things. And I kind of appreciate watching your denial like fade from your eyes, right? Like disillusionment is disappearing. But it's a really hard,
I'm trying.
it's a really difficult place to be.
Yeah. And this is probably where I was like, just rip the bloody bait egg off. Like these models are staying and like they're not going to old world, or they're going and like you're pricing me out so I don't use them. I'll forget about them and I'm strictly cool with it.
Yes.
And it's gone.
No, please do. You go.
No. I was just going to say, like, it's very interesting because, like, you know, we did talk about the core, but the reality is like you could build something, you know, similar. Like you could go, you know, let's do something. Okay, right. Instead of doing Cavaliers, I'm going to go 2 or 3 units of Drakespawn Knights. I'm likely going to support it with the Dreadlord on Black Dragon. I might have, you know, some Dark Shards. I might have some this, have some that. And you could kind of replicate some of this stuff. Like you don't have like a War Machine anymore. There used to be bolt throwers back in the day, but like there's some things where you could take this archetype and go, right, well, I'm not going to put in all of the shooting into cannons. I'm going to put them into Iron Drakes, and I'm going to have to use the bridge from Forbidden Power more to kind of project that power of the Iron Drakes rather than the range of the cannon. Yeah. And that's cool. You could still do that. Have your Warden King, have this, have that. But it's clear as day. And I'm just reminding myself, like, you're paying either more points or you're not getting as much value as the human counterpart right now.
Yes. It's just like the Iron Drakes cost way more than the Fusiliers. And they do similar things, right? Like you would rather just have the Fusiliers because of the way it stitches together with the rest of this here and then works. And the Iron Drake is more expensive and requires the Forbidden Power just as the Fusiliers do. Like it just gets tricky, right? To justify bringing those other options. And it is like I used to bring like just dwarves and elves, like splash them in because they filled roles that humans couldn't do. Humans can do all of it now. And kind of do it better, but the whole list design at that point is becoming very cemented where we're standing, right? Unless you go really radical, which it might time in some ways.
Yeah, right. Well, let's bring up some other lists, and
I think it's worth. Stadium's up next, right? But,
no, this was your prime example. Still, Cavalier. This is you bringing in Callus and Jack, for example.
So this is like this is sort of just as an example of what you do with your last 500 points. You have, like we discussed, a very rock solid center game plan. Objectives in the middle of the border and extreme danger from you because you could like move all the way across no man's land immediately. You'd fire the cannon straight down that column and just knock out stuff that is giving you a headache. But then the discussion becomes, what do you do about the wide points on like Surge of Slaughter? What do you do when they shut off the middle on you on cyclic shifts or something, right? And there have been a couple, like you need some of those skirmishing units that can stand their ground and move a little quickly off on the flanks and sort of secure your cannons while also taking points with that 500 points, right? One thing notable is that like that core does not have a wizard, and not every list is going to run up with a wizard. And that is also very expensive because the bridge is very near and dear to City's heart, right? It's the only faction that can Feck is around now, so that's not true. Cities has a unique ability to move 3 inches when their units go through the bridge because of the way the orders are not classified as a move ability. So you can do your little 3-inch move even when you're set up, which brings up Cowls and Toll is usually a really good answer for this problem of all of your stuff has its shoes tied together. You need one piece that can do wherever it wants or be anywhere on the board. And Cowls and Toll has almost always been our answer for, hey, go take that point. Right, stop me from losing this game because just stop the point lead. Right, go take that thing away. Go kill that support hero. Just be that weird thing that fixes like is your band-aid when the game is really happening and you have to like compensate when the gameplay's going weird. You have one. So the idea here is like in addition to the core that we talked about, you bring the Luckyman core with the foot marshal, we call him. He's really valuable. I think a lot of the time he's competing with a wizard entirely. Like you lose the spell, but you get this character that is not only increasing every single one of your like foot heroes and your cavaliers by 3 control, which makes a big difference for making sure that if you're fighting that center, you're winning it. It also means that he gives that relic envoy doesn't seem like it's important, but often like late game when suddenly you do need to spread out and handle multiple places, he can give one cavalier unit the ability to receive orders anywhere on the board. So you can get real use out of that cavalier later in the game, giving them that relic and then sending them off to figure it out. Right. So he's really valuable for those reasons. Plus he gives a standing order to the command for, so they can charge even when they're not wholly within 12 of Zenestra and still not immediately die for whatever they charge into, because you're activating somewhere else first, probably. But Callous and Toll is 2 units that both go in Deep Strike every single game. Very fun in deployment when you just start every game by saying, like, I'm just going to put Callous and Toll in Deep Strike. You go an X, and then they put half the army down, and you put your Ogre down, and that's it. And they're like, no, please, your whole army. I'd like to see where it is. But Callous and Toll are a really, really valuable unit in context. Like, they're not super powerful. All of their attacks wound on 4s, which is very uncomfortable. They don't have infinite number of health. They have like 22 wounds between the 2 units together. But it is the ability for Deep Strike, arrive at 9 inches away anywhere on the board, and then use their own order to move both units because they're humans 3 inches closer, mean that small weak units on flanks are in a lot of danger of you arriving, knocking out those like 8 to 10 hit points, taking that objective, or even worse, taking an objective and assassinating that like wizard or whatever that you can just like nuke with them. And every once in a while, there's a circumstance where they can like really plug into some kind of monster wizard or like hero character that you could do just like comical amounts of damage with like the double damage into wizards and priests. But usually you're using them as your one unit that can go anywhere on the board to take something without having to move all these interdependent pieces out of their position in the middle of the game, right? So that's the reason why, even though I hadn't been playing with them, which was sort of a personal challenge to see if I could play without them, I've come back and said, I think I need them in truth, in order to fix this problem where that center is very strong, but you need to play the wider position if you're going to a GT or something. I think in truth, Callous and Toll are probably a really rock solid choice for that like last 500 points. Other options I can think of are like, you could just take a 3rd unit of Cavaliers, kind of fun, right? You should have 30 horses. They don't all fit around Zenestra comfortably, like to all work right with the whole 12-inch thing, and it like magnifies your problem. But if you leave one of those units wide, maybe it can take an objective and play. You still have the Rend 1 problem at that point, and you don't have any screens for the cannons. You can also just take like a lot of garbage. So you can take like 2 Wilder Core and Command Core and like another relic, or switch something into Wizard and take the Forbidden Power, right? Like there's a lot of flexibility with that last 500 points, but none of it is like nearly as strong as your center, and you're sort of compensating for like how unwieldy that middle is here. But I think this is where I would go if I were to play 3 cannons. I think the Callous and Toll choice is probably the way to take it. And maybe even with the Executioner build that I took to Everwinter, Callous and Toll probably are the right pick on the edge.
Yeah, I was just doing some. I was revisiting some War Scrolls while you were talking again. I think I cracked the code. I think I've worked out what you can replace those 5 Cavaliers with already.
Yeah,
I think I worked it out. All right,
let's see if I haven't thought of it already.
All right, you reckon you're just gonna?
We'll find out.
War Hydra.
Is it the
8-inch move, 12 health at the end of every turn? It's going to heal flat 6.
Okay,
like it's the fight of like for I think it is. It's 5 up save, no ward, 10 like 12 health.
Okay, but you know what? Like that fights the other person's Wilder Core and wins. You know, like there's a I might try OC5. It's pretty good. The issue is like you do need a hero following him around, or else to get him. Maybe is it all companion weapons? I don't even know that profile. I should be
the goads and whips are not companions, but the razor sharp fangs certainly are. Also, anti-infantry with +1 Ren and shoots in combat with a fiery breath. 6 attacks for D3 damage.
Oh,
it's not bad.
Okay, all right. I'm genuinely gonna write that down because that's quite funny. And I sort of like, you may be right that like you're right. I'm looking for that magic, right? Like you need that piece that does that thing on the side, and I can't. Like that might be it. So I'm gonna actually write that down and try to include it in something, and I'll let you know how it comes out.
Like it's not a bad. Like that's like.
And And like this was something with the Steam Tank Commander over the summer list was like sometimes it takes that one bad unit, but it's magic in that one spot, right? And maybe this is that. I do like the shooting attack. That's kind of interesting.
And you know what? If someone's attacking your War Hydra instead of something else,
what a fool they are, right? What are they doing? That unit's terrible.
On the flip side, it's like if you don't focus on it because it heals flat.
Yeah,
it has anti-infantry. So it'd be Ren 2 for damage 2, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s with 6 attacks. For 160 points, it's actually not bad. It's not.
If you do keep him within 12 of a hero, which there's not much reason he can't. Like you could, he would have a ward save on defense at least, which means that it is true to like a ward. No, but anything in cities can receive a 5 aboard from an order if they don't charge, right? So this is one of the magical things about this army is like every war scroll is a little bit more than it says just on the paper. But that could end up being a funny little like hard to handle piece. How many points was it?
160. It was the same points as those 5. It was the same points as the 5 Cavaliers that you had on the last list.
I do like the shooting genuinely. Is it 10 inches or 12? The shooting.
It's 10 inch, 6 attacks, hits on 4s, wounds on 3s, no Ren for D3, shoots in combat.
All right.
Companion.
I'm genuinely going to try that out, and I'll come back to you with it. But
there you go.
You're right. Like I think it does illustrate the point that like maybe it takes a little bit of madness at this point to get to see where this army goes from here. Well, there is one other way to play, which I think is this is list here. Yep. Which is, I mean, all right. So this is, I think. Actually, I do love this, and maybe I should take it. I have not played with this Skyport. I have played with the Profiteers before, but I haven't really like this. Felt like when over the summer when I had a lot of time to play, I really was locked in on a list that was working quite well, and then Fabian started doing just as well, if not better, with this idea. And it really rotates. Like a lot of people take the Skyport Profiteers because they're just straight, like especially before their points hikes, they're just straight up extremely powerful. Like. Points per wound is good. The shooting profile is good. They give a lot of armies access to an unbelievable just ward shut off. Like that has been just monstrously strong. And give any army the ability to just like teleport their infantry around, right? So suddenly everybody's this kind of cool boys. You're playing your Fire Slayers and you're throwing like just units of 10 stuff all over the place. Really powerful. But I think in cities, it really becomes like a little ridiculous. Because as we discussed, like in Cities of Sigmar, a unit that was set up that turn can move 3 inches, right? So the idea here, using the Skyport Profiteers, is you spend 1 command point to send a command corps unit anywhere on the board outside 9 inches. And that command corps unit is carrying the Freegal Marshal Relic Envoy's order from anywhere on the board to push them 3 inches closer to their target. In addition to this, you've definitely hit your 3 up on your top Repullis and Lear, meaning the command corps is going to be +1 to wound. And you're also going to, in addition to move ordering them forward, you're going to, when they charge, give them 1 more order. So suddenly they become like quite a deadly unit for their cost at that point. So what this ends up doing is you have sort of, what is there, 4 command corps here? 1, 2.
So what I can tell you as well, like, so I can read out actually. So I did reach out to Fabian.
Yeah, these words are going to be mine about this. Yeah.
Well, he gave me some words, but he also gave me his list that he's running at Masters, which is next weekend at the time of recording, right? So the first thing I'll comment on is what he actually said about the Profiteers. So he said the main reason I'm sticking with the Profiteers. So the Profiteers here. So this was recently at Winter War 5-0, and that was pre-battle scroll. So now the Profiteers are 350, so that they have gone up in points. So I'll explain what his list looks like now for upcoming Masters, but like this obviously was already 5-0. So the main reason I'm sticking with the Profiteers is because it allows me to punish mistakes like no other option can. Teleport buffed command corps with their envoy, move 3 inches, kill a hero or something, and that can be game winning. And I've seen this play out. Like my opponent, that Chris I was talking earlier, was running the Profiteers, and it's really hard, right? Because if I'm looking at the cannons, I'm going for the cannons.
Yep.
The Cavaliers come for me, or if I go for the Cavaliers, then the cannons are coming for me. And then all in the meantime, I've got a steam tank to deal with over here. I've got these shenanigans from the Profiteers, and there's just too much for me to try to handle. So I can 100 appreciate what you just said.
Unparalleled in flexibility, right? Because you can either this is a durable castle, and if you commit to it, the Cavaliers are going to charge you and do meaningful damage. The tank might move somewhere else, and now suddenly the Thunderers can all fire at you too. It's not that easy to break the center of this. But every time you try to get close to it, if you leave any flank open, either they're taking an objective from you, or they're snagging an intercept target by shooting the command core through the railgun, or helicoptering them in. I don't know what it is in lore. And then suddenly having this random unit is with 2 control on it, with real damage. It's just killing stuff, right? And this is perfectly Fabian, because Fabian is a control player who wants to win every game and always have the way out, right? And something like this has every tool you need to do that. Now, mind you, it takes a lot of practice to know how all of these pieces work together. So the teleport, or the bridge, or when the steam tank should be in the right place, or I don't know if the steam tank's still in it, or where Calus and Toll go. I think the steam tank was the casualty, if I recall.
Let me tell you the good pick. Yeah, so you're 100% correct, and it's allowed him to get an extra command corp. So what's the master looks at your head? I was just having a laugh. So what the list?
We were reviewing Masters for Matrix, and I think I saw this earlier, but that's why my head said 4, right? I think I'd seen that it was going up to 4, which is disgusting, right? It's oh, here we go, yeah.
You shouldn't have said anything and just look like Nostradamus. So what does the upcoming new battle scroll look like? So it's a Fusilier Major on Warhawk, General Brazier of Holy Flame, Cosmopolitan Leader. You've got the reinforced unit of Cavaliers, 2 units of Command Corp, and the Iron Wheeled Great Cannon in the General's Reg. So pretty close to what we've currently got. We've got the Frigate Marshal on and Relic Envoy with the Heirloom weapon, Warhammer. We have
the status, by the way. Yeah. The only one you should ever take. You should never take any other weapon on the Marshal. If you do, you're
not play Warhammer without a Warhammer.
The little Warhammer, thank you. That's a really good way to put it.
Regiment 3 is Battle Mage, and then you've got your the Profiteers. So yeah, it looks like the steam tank is the casualty, but we've picked up our 4th Command Corp. Yeah, 2 in the General's Reg, 2 in the Frigate Marshal's Reg. So pretty good trade actually, keeping the core of that army.
So the part of the reason is the steam tank commander no longer can be obscured, so he's much more vulnerable than he used to be. He's also one of the more expensive things here. And by taking him out and replacing, moving some stuff around, you brought in the other cannon, which is your new war machine, as your target for the Fearless Exemplar faction, right? Because you're going to be putting that cannon at Ren 3 or whatever it's shooting at, assuming you're not using the break shot. But you also get another unit to either screen stuff with, or be shot through the Sky Profiteers and go take positions on the border, threaten weak targets on the edge. That gives you just immense control with this kind of thing. Very hard list to run, truly buyer beware. This is a very unusual way to play Sigmar, but very rewarding and cool to be able to do it as well. And I think Fabian I think Fabian took first place at Nova. Yeah, of course he did. So he went undefeated 8-0 with something similar to this with the Pontifex. And then even with her leaving, which obviously she interacts very well with this kind of teleporting, the old version, is able to still deliver really good results with this kind of change thing. So there are other ways to build this army. They just get very strange, right? This is sort of, but maybe that's what you're looking for too. Hard way to play. Really, really impressive, and a really great, a truly great list. Not impressive because it's bad, impressive because it's excellent, right?
And I think this kind of comes back to Dylan. People were asking about how do I make elves work? How do I make drills work? And and we're not going to speculate here. You could build 2,000 points of just dwarves, right? And I think the dwarf one is kind of, easy. You've got, 1 or 2 wardens. You're going to have, the Rune Lord. You're going to have a couple of Rune Lords in there, obviously depending on the mixture of Warding King versus Rune Lords. You're going to have reinforced units of Iron Drakes. You're going to have reinforced units of Iron Breakers. You might have some Hammerers. You don't have enough units in the mix to get that diversity, but I think the power really comes where you combine the humans and the elves, or the humans and dwarves. I'm probably being reminded why we might not go elves and dwarves as the package, but rather how you might kind of combine still do what you want to do. Like, we're not saying like if you want to run all dwarves, like power to you, run all the dwarves.
Please do. Actually, it's cool, right? And I think it should be taken advantage of. Like, can.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, do it. But like, if you're trying to get the best possible outcome, I think we've made some pretty solid arguments why you would go heavy on the humans.
Yeah.
Although, God, I love Talia. Like,
she's a difficult discussion because I think that she's good. And I never did. And that's a hard reality because I love that model. Even my character, I think, is great. But you're right. I think I am looking at, like, I think if you do want to bring some non-human things, I think I'm looking at, for instance, like, kind of want to see if hammers have a place as like a counterpunch hit. Like, there's Ren 2 on like a lot of dice again. And maybe with this nicer front line that we have now with the Cavaliers, like maybe that they can truly do like the mass damage that's necessary to finish a game off. But again, they're really expensive. So like I end up even weaker on the edges by getting stronger in the middle with these kinds of changes. But I think it is really hard to justify bringing the other options right now. And they don't have upside. There's not like a new utility that works well. And every time you bring another one of them, it gets harder to justify the rest of the list too.
Yeah, I'm trying to put, like I could run Talia. Then I kind of always go back to the Freed-Build Marshal and having more customization on that.
Mm-hmm. I don't see you have it though if you have the Cavaliers because you Cosmopolitan Leader, right? So you only have the relic.
That was what I was going to say. Is then it goes back to, it's almost like I want to go back to 3rd edition where I could get an extra artifact somehow and then just have some type of extra artifact on the Freed-Guild Marshal, let it go out and do its thing. To your point, Cosmopolitan Leader still very good, and if you're investing so heavily on the Cavaliers, then you can't put it on this one solo monster hero. You need that support piece.
Yeah, it's hard to justify. I think. What am I looking at? I also like the look of Fusiliers again. They're really cheap for what they do. They shoot very far. A lot of stuff is vulnerable now because it can't be obscured. Kind of an interesting choice that I haven't seen in a long time. You could just run a lot, and now a lot of the buffs for the shooting out of the Fusilier Major mean that you don't need to be reinforced with Master Ballistics and all out attacking for the +1 to wound. You can sort of pepper people down. That's not bad. But I think, it's hard to bring
kind of volume game there, right? Like with Fusiliers,
they're just dirty cheap. They're dirt cheap. They're so cheap, and they're so obnoxious to kill, and they're very usable too, right? They're in combat, fine, I'll shoot one time, whatever. They're not in combat, they shoot 18, they go to rend. Like they're just really, they're sticky, they're awkward, they're weird, they're maybe they can play the edges. You don't, because also the quality is so bad, they don't always have to shoot. You can go auto run them and you don't lose an important piece of shooting either. Kind of a direction to go. But again, like maybe that means that we just like dissolve that Cavalier front line and just take like 3 Fusiliers in groups of 10s and 20s and see where that takes you. But very different again.
If you were doing that, if you were just taking units of like minimum sized Fusiliers, wouldn't you be better off taking Will the Corp Hunters?
I believe like the shooting on Fusiliers versus Will the Corps are approximately the same, but the Fusiliers shoot 3 inches further, so the damage output is like pretty comparable. The difference for me is that the Wilder Core get the pregame move, which is often valuable. Like that does make a difference. It does. You don't think it does, and it does. It really, really does. So 1 or 2 work, but Fusiliers having ignore 1 rend on a 5-up on-demand ward from anything else, like it's really weird to kill them because you send them. I used to do this all the time, and it was very fun. You send them to the bridge, to the middle of the board. They all fortify on the other end because the way the rule is written, when they are set up, they lose fortify, but the unit still hasn't moved, so they just refortify on the other side. They can fire 18 or 21 inches anywhere. It's not a great shooting attack, but it hurts stuff. And then it's sort of bait, right? Like it's sitting in the middle. It's right by the bridge. They get tagged or charged by something. You use 8, 10, whatever on your turn through the like all-out defense in the 5-up board. Pull them back to your side, rally them back up, have them fire again. It's a really like usable, interesting piece to take with. But it's sort of, again, the best it can do is going to be 41 shots, 3 3s, run 1/1, which is like, if your opponent doesn't spike, doesn't have a ward, is like 12 damage to a 3-up. And that's not game-winning damage. It's meaningful, but it's not like just like, oh, I got it. We're done. That's a really important damage resist. But again, 220 points. Very cheap.
Yeah, they are. And that's, Obviously, World of Corp Hunters, the pre-game move is so valuable. I think that's kind of where I might overvalue that, knowing that.
And I think you may be right in saying that too. I don't think that I think both kind of have the argument, and I wouldn't call World of Corp a mistake at all.
Move 5, because like I've been playing with my Hobgrots, and they have a pre-game move, and I love them. Yes, they cost me 70 points versus the 110. But whether it's getting close to that objective and then using for example, a redeploy potentially to then get onto an extra objective, even not on my turn, or being able to start that momentum a little earlier, or, push back deep striking a little further as well. That's been really valuable to me.
Shut off your opponent's wrathful cycles on the first turn is a big deal too, right? Because if you can make them not trigger that, then even if you double them, they may not be scoring the underdog mechanic on it. There's all sorts of reasons why even a 5-inch pregame move suddenly is game warping. So Will or Gore are a great unit, even for that, even though they evaporate if anything lifts at them funny. It's worth it just to move the unit up.
Yeah, they're and I think this is where Cities has such an interesting roster. And yes, we talk about the core being pretty consistent, and you said 1,500 points, and their package is solid, it's an absolute solid package. But when you start digging through the trash, and I'm calling this this is I don't know what you call them in America. I don't know what you call America. I'm going to say it now. We call them op shops, opportunity shops, where you whether it's secondhand or
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay, you go through the trash and you find gems. You find gems, and you might not have looked at the Arc Fleet Master of War Hydras or whatever, but then you the War Hydra. You're you know what? It's not bad. It's actually not bad.
And whenever GHB rolls around too, and the missions all change, suddenly something becomes more valuable. One of the things you can't take hammers, especially now, because you lost Field Sergeant. So they only go the 4 inches or the 7 with the order, and the objectives are all over the place. So it's very hard to have a centralized plate that they can reach. But if that changes and it becomes all dense next time around, even though those things are expensive, now it really is a gem in context, and you have a reason to bring it again. Going through the garbage. I mean, it's true. We talk about the War Hydra thing. Maybe there's some promise there. Steam Tank is still interesting, right? And there's just endless bucket of crap you can keep looking through. But it's hard. It's always really painful to navigate off of that center build. And for a lot of people, it feels like you're kind of forced to take that 1,500 points unless you're really good at the game and know what you need to do and exactly what you need to accomplish to compensate for the fact that you've just made a lot of your army a lot less just raw effective by taking some of those other odder things around.
Yeah. No, I can see the argument. I would just drop the 3 cannons and run all the Hurricanums. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't listen. Don't do that.
Well, if you can only bring 1.5 Hurricanums in exchange, well, now you probably take 2.
It's Hurricanum. Depends on which way.
Cool too.
Hurricanums are very cool. You're dealing mortals. You've got a wizard. Look, we're going down a trash rabbit hole.
There we go.
I'm going to ask you a couple of burning questions from support.
Sure. Yeah, let's get out.
It's what I'm is get ready. I'm digging through the trash. When you go shopping with your partner, oh, look at this. No, you got 1 million of them at home. Just you don't need another
you're looking at
cheese board.
I should go need another dwarf army or something like that, right?
That vase is cracked, it's been glued. Stop pushing this good enough cracked vase. You got a human vase at home. All right. If people wanted to start cities, do you have any advice on that? Any key advice that we haven't touched on just yet?
So I think one thing is if it's your first army, I do think you should play it. I think if you like the models, they're gorgeous and they're take forever to paint, which is good and bad, right? You'll get a lot of mileage out of it. Be prepared for frustration as you sort of come to grips with the army. Because I think we talked about it earlier, a lot of the war scrolls in raw use are much worse than their counterparts in other armies. There's nothing like Varangard or Chaos Knights in cities. Even our best Cavaliers or whatever are a great unit, but it's nothing raw power. And behind it, in order to get it to be functioning, you need to be very patient with learning that everything needs to be lined up, right? Because if you forget a factor or you don't account for one of the limitations, you'll find yourself in situations where oh, you really wanted to charge those dryads over there or something, and you sent your cavaliers out, but you're not anywhere in your orders anymore, and you suddenly discover oh, my unit just was obliterated, and you really needed that unit because everybody else was there to support it too. These are the tricky things about it, is like you are going to find that your units, you're going to scratch your head and be like, oh God, like why is my shooting unit through 4s and 4s, Ren 1-1? The reason is because you get a lot of it and you can do a lot of options with it, but you're not going to win through raw power. And you're often going to find yourself like confused why your unit just doesn't feel as good or as natural to use as other people's. Just be patient. Make sure you're like taking note of when you like accidentally pile out of 12 inches or like get bit off more than you can chew, or like are thinking about, having expectations about what the units can do. If you're starting, I think if you buy a Founding Foray in a battle, a combat patrol, it's a pretty good start. I think it gets you 5 or 10 Cavaliers, it gets you 20 Fusiliers, a Command Corps, a Fusilier Major, and Ogre Warhulk. Like that's sort of the core bits. So you can get away with getting started with the army with those pieces. And then they sort of, because the humans are so dominant in the list building too, you can always find a reason to have one of those human units around because it will work well enough, right? So even if you have a smattering of stuff to start the army with, I would just go for it, right? So pay attention to your like mistakes as you're playing. Be very careful about 12 inches. Like just always measure from your support pieces 12 inches all the time. And then get yourself a Callous Atoll, because you'll find it'll just like take a huge headache off your game when you just like teleport down on Turk 2 and like take a side objective and then malinger over there and win for that reason. But it's cool. So it's a nice army to learn the game with because of those reasons. Like you learn to be very careful and to leverage all the pieces and to pre-plan turns entirely, because if you don't, it's not going to work. So hard and demanding, but rewarding.
Yeah, I would agree. It is not a easy army to pick up. It's going to be a lot of trial by fire, but it'd be very rewarding. You'll be learning good mechanics of Warhammer.
And it won't let you down because there's 1 or 2 3-ups now, but a lot of the abilities of the army do not have randomness to them. You use your order, it just goes. It's not like a 3-up for your Crib Mortals to happen, and if you miss it, your army, they fall apart. Like you get to sort of have the autonomy as you're playing, which is unusual in Sigmar. I don't think. A lot of this game has to do with risk management, and there's not a lot of risk in cities you have to manage, but there's a lot of other stuff you have to. So
that's resource management.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like a project manager in Warhammer form.
Jeez, you're gonna ruin the game for me. That's a horrible idea.
Are you a project manager?
Anything like that? No, thank God. Right?
Wait till we start having scrums and visual management boards. And anyway, Loft Paint's asking, what is your approach to deployment, especially using the cannon build?
Okay. So I mentioned that I haven't played cannons. One thing I would be careful is the trap of putting them all right next to each other over the course of the entire game. If they're all bundled up, like that critical fail point where all 3 get tagged is much more likely to happen. So just keep that in mind. They shoot very far. They shoot like one of the furthest units in the game, right? Like they 24-inch at base range, and then they move 3 to fire. So it's like 27-inch threat, which means that you can be a little bit back from the line to threaten with them right out of the gate. One thing to know about cities is that it's almost always 5 drops because you want a lot of heroes. So I would say like what your opponent's going to look like a lot of the time is that you should format your drops so that they're as top heavy as possible, right? You want as many drops that are like 1-foot hero that doesn't matter where they go as possible. What that lets you do is you put down 1 hero and your opponent puts down a regiment, and you know where 4 units are. You put a second hero down, they put down another regiment, that's 3 more units, you know where they are. And then your third unit goes down, it's a Willer Corps off on the side, they finish deploying, and you take all 3 cannons and you put them in a spot where you know that if they give you the first turn, you are going to hit something good, right? And then I would just be careful to it's more important in cities to take actions that are sort of consistent and don't break up your pieces. Because if you do crazy stuff that looks for long bomb charges and puts you out of position, you're more unlikely to unravel all the interlocking pieces, right? If you're looking for long charges, or if with your Cavaliers, if it's going to put you outside of 12 of Sinestro, don't take it. With regards to cannons, if it means that you're putting your cannons in danger or putting your army in a weird spot, you don't have to fire every turn. Just set up your kill zone, control your space, just take it easy, right? Always sort of pick the most manageable thing to do. So especially with the assumption that you're going first every game, which is usually what happens when you're a cities player, keep your stuff safe so that if they do take first on you, it's fine. So cannons 3 inches back from your Cavaliers, but also in a way that you can take advantage of where they've deployed if you have the opportunity, because you get to have, although we don't ever get to double, at least you know where they put their army before you started putting your stuff down, which can be more valuable, honestly. Maybe maybe a hard sell compared to doubling, but it's good. You get value on your first turtles every time.
No, that's great. And speaking of cannons, how do we beat monster lists without cannons?
So monsters are always been kind of tricky for cities because the damage, or all of our damage is like, it's not shock damage, right? Like even Cavaliers are like 30 attacks, run 1, right? So you're into a 3-up monster with a 5-up ward. Almost chances are you like never kill that, even with a fully juiced Cavalier unit. So that Cavalier unit goes in, does like 10 damage, and then gets hit. And in the past, we used to not have a ward only charge. So when you took damage from stuff you didn't kill, it was like a big problem. But it does mean that monsters are an issue because they start, they just sort of, they don't scale as poorly as other armies, right? Your monster doesn't die, it swings at almost full strength, meaning that you will take damage even when you commit to those monsters. It's been a problem for a long time. It means that you do need to bring something that can handle it, because if it's not cannons, it's got to be executioners, or you're going to need a 3rd Cavalier unit, or you just need to get comfortable with the fact that you should attack the monsters at the end of the game only and focus on everything that you can accomplish. So if you're looking at monsters and it seems suspect that you're going to kill it, but there's a unit near the monster that you can kill, don't dive for, like, literally I had a game recently I lost because I dove for the monster, but don't listen to what I did. Dive for the unit, but like kill the unit and just let the monster hit you. Usually monsters don't do as much damage as fully like juiced units, so your Cavaliers are going to be okay, and you can handle that monster later in the game when you sort of have wrapped up everything else and everybody can kind of join up and fight that thing. One of the things that is good about cities and the monsters is that you have a bunch of garbage units, and that monster, if he doesn't split his attacks right and he gets stuck in combat, like he might lose a whole turn killing your battle mage later on. So that's valuable as well. It's one of the bad matchups has always been Gargants, especially when we don't have shooting. So the shooting helps now. But just because like either we had infantry that didn't have a ward when it charged and it wiped, like some of the rampages on the Gargants would wipe out half the unit before it arrived, or none of the units in cities did enough damage to kill the Gargant in one shot, meaning that they got to hit you and you lost too many models and you were subject to just not kill it at all on second activation. So it's always been actually a big tricky problem is the monsters. The cannons have fixed that, kind of, but not everybody wants to play cannons, and I don't play cannons because I find them challenging to use and something that I can lose games with. So, but it does mean you have to be very careful about this problem, and you're not alone in feeling like it's challenging or weird to do.
Yeah, with 2 attacks each, 4s and 2s, yes, there's obviously ways to get that down. It's rocks and diamonds. There's been times where those cannons have blasted the thing off the board. There's been plenty of times where the cannon has been so underwhelming where it's like, you just, why have I done this? And I've seen that look of disappointment on so many of my opponents' faces. They're like, oh.
It's a real problem for players who are looking. I sort of phrase it when I go to an event like a GT. I don't really go to win 5 games. I go to like make sure that I bring a list that I know shouldn't lose a game, right? And cannons are something that have really high highs, but also can lose you games, either because they just strategically can't be used or they just miss. And I'm not angling to lose a single game, so I don't take units that can lose like that. I try not to. I try to avoid them. So monsters are not interesting to me because they do the same thing. Very swinging output, very fragile. Like if it dies, it's a lot of points off the table. And I don't love the triple cannons personally because even though it might be easier to use than the executioners are just slightly more flexible to make sure that maybe they can contribute to the game, that kind of thing going on there. So if you don't take the cannons, it's a harder game to play, but it's a little bit more under your control. Is sort of how I would describe that.
And I'm going to advocate for my free guild marshal on Griffin again. So if I'm not taking cannons and you need a monster killer, I don't think this is a bad little choice. Like if I'm not taking cannons, like I'm not taking the Griffin in addition to cannons, but if I had no cannons and I was like choosing no cannons, I think this is one of your best monster killers, especially if you were to give it, like, say, for example, the Glimmering or, there's certain ways you can like boost it up. I don't think this is a bad little choice. Obviously, the Rampage, you're turning off commands, and it's got a pretty good profile.
Talia also I forget about it often, but she just kills monsters. Like if you all out attack her to a monster, she does a lot of damage, and it's meaningful. And also she has that Strike's Last Rampage. It's not always as usable as you think, right? Like a lot of circumstances, a good player will be able to position in a way that Talia is going to have a hard time rolling that free up, and you still might miss it. But she does truly just hurt monsters if you swing it though, which is good. It's very good and something that maybe is worth considering if you're playing in an area that is just saturated in big pigs, for instance, Talia might be your answer to saving your bacon, so to speak, in a lot of that.
She's 50 more points than the Free Guild Marshal on Griffin. But
Talia's a weird pick. Yeah, I really like her, and I love the model. She's actually cheap for the monster. Like other factions would be like, I would kill for her. The problem is like a lot of her points are like built into. She used to be very valuable because she brought the elves for cheap, and they brought the dwarves for cheap because she could take anybody at the faction now. So you have to pay the tax on the slightly more expensive wizard or priest. You could have her. The other one was before we were using the non-Scourge Grand Pontifex. It was very hard to get a ward save in cities on your go turn, right? So you didn't want to take turns that had too many units committed because it meant that a lot of your units were activating after your opponent swung, and you had none of your durability without that ward save often. Talia's once per game ability gave you that ward save on offense, and it also gave you a really crucial +1 to wound on human units that you didn't have access to before. Kind of the issue is, if I have 20 Cavaliers that are Scourge of Grand and I have Cosmopolitan Leader, I have access to the +1 to wound more consistently in more fight phases, and I already have the ward save all the time, including shooting and including when I don't line up all these pieces. Like, she's sort of like that part of her build was lost. So what's left for the job for her is like as like a roving monster that moves around, but at 15 wounds on a 4-up save, like it gets really dicey really quick with her. One covering fire does like 8 damage, and you're just like crossing your fingers, like do not die in combat to these nurglings, because she might, and she has, like, for me, and it just is so disappointing when something so valuable like that drops dead, when you could just have 10 more Cavaliers, which already work all the pieces. It's really hard to sell. But I think that she's definitely more than playable. She's good. She's cool, too.
I think the challenge with Talia and the Free Guild Marshal on Griffin is they both got the 4-up save.
Yeah, there's
just like that's the challenge. If there were 3-up saves, then we're cooking. Then we're cooking.
I actually almost, yes, totally. If they had 3-ups, this would be a very different discussion, because now they're that sticky monster, right? I have the problem with the 3-up save fighting them, but now if I have them on my side, I also have that weird problem that can just swing a game when it doesn't die. But at a 4-up, anything can hurt them. Like, truly anything can do enough damage to make it really, really dicey.
Especially with all-out attack, because now you're saving on a base of 5 for every rend even.
They need it, or else they don't hurt anything. And you could have had 10 more Cavaliers, unfortunately. Like, that's just always the answer, which is brutal. Yeah. I actually really do. There were some reasons to bring the Free Gold on Griffin. He's also a viable target for the Cavalier charge roll. So when the Cavaliers do the red work ability and they pick a horse marshal to give charge to, they can also pick the Griffin. And that's kind of interesting, because it means that the Griffin can. There's a really nice trick with the Tune to Garan. One of the most difficult things about that tactic path is that when you're retreating units or combat, in a lot of armies, if they don't have retreat and charge, even you've lost that unit's output, often on a really critical moment in the game, right? So if you were to retreat those Cavaliers out, like, you would lose all that output. Sure, you score 5 points, but it may not have been worth it. So it becomes really tricky to justify that tactic when it can ask you so much to take advantage of an opportunity to score it. With the Marshal and Griffin, or the Horse Marshal, on the turn where your opponent comes into you after you seize the center, like, you trigger the charge on the Horse Marshal and he piles into combat with your opponent behind your line, right? So he's pretty safe, and now he's in combat. And so on the subsequent turn, he retreats. That's one of your retreats done. And then he's eligible to be targeted by that ability again. So any Cavaliers that were in combat, if he's still within 3 inches, you roll a dice, he charges. It's a little bit of damage, but he might be able to rejoin the fight again immediately. And the Griffin Marshal is the same way, where you could retreat him out of combat, put him on the other side of the combat, as long as you're free of the Cavaliers, and it's dice takes. You have to roll 3-up or 4-up. He might be able to pile in again and swing on damage 3 with the charge one more time. Kind of cute, kind of cool, made me worth it. Kind of nice. And if you don't have any Cavaliers and you have a bunch of Command Corps, you can do some really cute double redeploys on 4s off the middle of the board with him. Command Corps can allow a second unit to get a redeploy. If they're both fully within 12 of that Griffin Marshal, he'll pull both of them back 4. So a very unsuspecting opponent might try to dive those Command Corps in the middle of the board right out of the gate and get stuck out in the water. Again, cute, and maybe just not as strong as 20 Cavaliers with a Sinestro kind of thing. But something to think about, right? Like, truly another option.
Here's another little idea from my trash bin. And then I'm going to ask you a final question. We'll wrap up. So, like, here's my other idea from the trash bin. It's like, what about a Free Guild Marshal on Griffin with Fiery Temper and then you have your 2 or 3 units of your free guild like Cavaliers, and you hit that charge. You're getting reroll charges for 18 inches on a very large base. It's a very big base on that Griffin. That could be a very big go turn.
It is. I think I would take that with dwarves. Probably got the bangs and 8-inch charges there. Again, you lost Cosmopolitan Leader, so all of your human units turned from real hammers into nothing. Right? It's just brutal. It's just simply brutal. You really have to find. Everything will be undone if you don't have something like that. Right? Maybe you take Talia. You can get +1 to wound on that turn or something. But interesting.
Yeah,
it's very.
Won't cost you. Talia won't cost you the trait. So.
No.
All right.
That's true. Okay. Final question.
All right. Final question, and it's an optimistic question. We assume there's going to be a battle tome in the next 12 months. Like in theory, right? Like I think Games Workshop's trying to avoid battle tomes in the last 6 months of an edition. We are now 18 months away from the next edition. In theory, should we always be on the 3-year cycle? So assuming that is all true, when there's going to be a battle tome this year, what is it that you want to see? And I'm happy for you to do both at least a model or some type of new thing. And then if there's a wish that you want to have, what do you want to see in a new battle tome?
So I think one of the I know from a faction design standpoint, heavy infantry is something we have nothing of, right? It's this goofy if you look at a city's army, you have this really goofy situation going on where you have all of the officers in training out in front of your army getting killed as your important melee fighting force, right? You have 3 command corps. Who are these people? Why are they standing in the front of the battle? That's where they're best in the faction, but why are they out there, right? Steel Helms that we talked about it just sort of don't have a real role in the board, especially when they're competing with the command corps for that job. But we also don't have any human infantry outside of the 2 models in the command corps that do damage, right? You don't have any infantry fighting piece. So some kind of thing that's, I don't know, it could be either a hammer or 1 or 2 attacks, damage 2, that does some kind of ability, like heavy foot knight or something like that. Or maybe 4 attacks extra, Ren 1/1, something like that. Just something that like brawls, right? Something that could give you an option to stick on the board that isn't just Cavaliers with the Sinestro, right? That's an actual role that's missing from the army. Personally, I want Pistolier or Outrider equivalents to come up, a Dragoon with a carbine would just that would be, I would run 10 of them, 20 of them, just at least the pet unit would be cool. What I understand is based on leaks and things like that, we're getting Cog Forts, and it's in sort of Cog Forts and maybe some kind of wizard monster hero is what I've heard as well. I think I have access to no leaks outside of what everyone else has seen. So I'm operating with the same knowledge. So
there's the hot scoop. Dylan's confirmed.
No idea.
Awesome.
Not in the know. But it should be the Cog Fort is in there. And I think what is worth recognizing with Cog Forts, especially based on how big people seem to think that they will be the physical model, it sounds like the army is going to, I wouldn't be surprised if the book is pretty different and sort of is built around that Cog Fort as the center identity of most cities lists. I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe the model is really cool and awesome to look at. And is inspires me to play with it, but that kind of really static thing with I hope it doesn't cost points, because if it's 300 points, I already have 1,500 points. I only have 500 points to get, right? I don't, that doesn't appeal to me as from a play perspective, but could be a really interesting model to look at. But I think that's where it ends up being. It's we're gonna end up being sort of a weird fortification. Helmsmiths play very slow, very artillery based. Cities has a lot of the same sort of tropes in its identity: gunpowder units, cannons. Everybody needs to be together, so you don't want to move too quick or anything like that. So you can see a castle around a huge terrain piece that moves or doesn't move, as part of where this army goes. I think I wouldn't like it as much. I love the dynamism that you can bring to cities right now with the number of little 3-inch moves and the small micro optimizations you can get out of all the flexibility in the orders. I'm not sure if that'll stick around, but it will be very different if you have a 2-foot tall cities gargant with cannons that do 3 damage that your opponent is I don't know what to do about this or something like that. Could be interesting at least. But a carbine wielding dragoon is my pick for what I would want out of this for sure. That would be wonderful.
All right. I'm hoping for less Imperial Guard, more Sisters of Battle. I want them to go hard.
I want them to go hard on the polytheist.
Yeah, like the weird or weird religious side of things here. Yeah,
Give me more crusade of like spreading the word of Sigmar with crusade, like the Dawnbringer crusade, rather than like I'm not inspired by the Comfort, but like give me like people are out there trying to give me Sisters of Battle, like give me a procession, give me like flagellants, like give me that on steroids.
Like a weird like, and I mean we have like this is one of the cool things about the Sigmar setting is you can have all these bizarre like it's kind of weird and dark. Like there's some weird corners to cities, especially too, that are not really well explained. Like as far as I understand, the life expectancy of like one of the people carrying Zedestra around is like 40 years shorter than anybody else, and not because they're killed in battle, but because they seem to age too fast. Right? There's some weird darkness going around with the faction that is kind of could be laid into with that kind of like bizarre, more like occult sort of style going on. And I think I agree with you. I prefer that over like a big cannon mountain on the middle of my table that I spent like 20 hours painting.
You're kind of cool. Like if you have basically like a mecha, like a Gargan almost like.
Somebody was talking about Gargants with like cannons and miniguns on it, right? Like I have my Gundam now in Sigmar, but it's a man or a really large giant or whatever they are.
It's a bit wild. Like, anyway, who knows? 12 months, sometime between now and then, there's going to be some type of tome. Who knows? Might not be called Cities of Seer. Could be the Dawnbringer Crusades. It could be the Cults of Sigmar. It could be who knows what we're looking into.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are just literal to see. What's that? It got me thinking too. See, can you hear me still? What's going on?
I'm just gonna say I think I've got you down a trash hole again.
I'll take all the way down the trash hole. Like I think a lot of people are disappointed that it's losing its like cosmopolitanness, right? Like there are not models of cities pre-guild that are like dwarves and elves, despite like in universe those cities being like multiracial and having multiple different fantasy races like in Falls. And I think it would be interesting to include them. I think either as unit auctions or even just like your command core could have models that are dwarves in it, right? Like I think that's one way that you could go about it. That I think I would prefer to see that rather than just like the faction only become humans again. And I don't think it needs to do that. And it's sort of like what's kind of cool that this is all the leftover people from the old world sort of are thrown into this space. Given the fact that we don't have any of those, I doubt it happens, but it's interesting. It's an interesting.
Well, I think that's where, like, for me, the rebrand might happen. And I don't know if it happens in 4th edition, maybe it's a 5th edition thing, that the cities of Sigmar were set up as bastions, as like civilization for Sigmar, whether it is Hammerhall, Tempest Eye, all the cities out there that have been taken out, right? But the narrative has focused away from city building more into like expansionism and like going out and reclaiming the realms, and maybe the dwarves and the elves stay at home. And it's the humans where there's more humans, they are, more expendable, and they're the ones who can be out there to they're the reclaimers of the realm.
Right? Like, and we often think of dwarves and elves as like a longer living people that stay in one place, like the dwarves stay in their holes a lot of the time. So you can see that the tropes of the fantasy universe match that idea that the humans go out to places because they live shorter. So.
And maybe they're specialists who they still gun the war machines. They still gun certain specialisms, but like the humans are the core and they're the expendable ones. And and that's that in my mind, at least that's how they progress the narrative. Because to your point, one of my gripes has always been like the dwarves, the elves, and the humans look very different. And like to have like a unified, we all come from the city of Lethis. Yeah, I can't visually tell outside of like a color scheme. But if there's a way to like either bring the unit together and Steel Helms is a mixture of races, or there's some type of real specialism that still unifies us, like that would I love to see.
Both are missing as it stands. One would preserve that cosmopolitanism to some degree, but it doesn't look like that happens. I would say probably the specialist direction goes more like we do have grenadiers or like a mortar battery or something, and it is crewed by smiths of dwarves or something like that. This seems more likely. So, but I'm excited to see it, and I think it's been a long time. I picked up cities in 3rd edition when the book came out, so I've been sitting with these models the entire time, right? And it's like we're like 3 years in, like it's time for some new blood to show up and have like spice some of these things up too, because there are still some like weaknesses in the range that which is kind of a lot of newcomers are drawn to, since it's sort of the normal faction, right? Like the baseline in the fantasy universe. And sort of has taken on a bigger role in the lore, as I understand too, over time. So it's about time, and I hope it's soon. And I don't look forward to painting a lot again in rushed batches to make sure I can get them on the table for tournaments, but it'll be fun to have a much larger roster that's more stable and not being sort of like set to legends or sent to the old book or anything like that too.
On the flip side, you rather that than a book with a hero. You token, fight health hero in it.
Yeah, I don't mistake me. I would not like I don't need another foot martial model or anything like that in another book that's largely the same. I would prefer the clock for it over that, even then.
Dylan, this has been awesome. I told you we could keep talking till the cows come home. Lots of questions, but I think we've kind of acknowledged them indirectly, like through the discussion about elves and dwarves and humans and where we're at, the core, what we're thinking and what's worked for us in the past, what we think is going to be important in the future. Obviously, we've got the Nurgle battle tome that's come out. There's going to be more battle tomes between now and then. So obviously, certain units might kind of stand up, but I think what we've seen, the core of the Cavaliers, the cannons are still very powerful. The Profiteer is still very good. I guess it depends on where you want to be able to flex and whether you drop one cannon to keep the core, whether you tweak and gut it completely. I think it's a good time to pause, revisit, have a look at some of the war scrolls. I think we've made some arguments to revisit.
But we so I will let you know. Yeah. Go sorry, you forced my hand. I've publicly announced that I'm going to play the War Hydra, and maybe I should even say I'll take it to a GT. But I'm not getting that yet. I'll keep this. I just recommendation. You said you need to take this unit. It's going to fix your whole world. That was your words specifically.
Wow,
and everybody heard you. So when I get,
and then you one that would have laid go 5-0. You'll go 5-0. Like people like Wohammer's going to put a list review of you and your War Hydras, and then people are going to go buy them, and then I'm going to blame you.
And then they're going to get to work anyways, or like shut away. My head's going to expand even more for that if that happens. But I will play the War Hydra once and let you know. And in addition to that, like I think one thing is I'm usually being bullied in public in the city's channel of your Discord anyway. So if anybody has any questions, like please feel free to send me a request to talk about it, because I just will. If you catch me at the right time of day, I will forget about everything else and talk to you for an hour discussing what I think of that too. So it's always just fun to see what's going on as well. So please feel free to reach out. Anybody has any questions or just wants to chat about it. Always available, kind of.
Speaking of bullying, Fabian says hello, Dill, and also to remind you that you deviated to Corn recently. So sorry, got to remind us he's still playing cities.
Sort of an admission now too is I'm taking Stormcast to Masters, not cities or Sigmar. It has to do with my role on the team, the available tactics, the battle plans we're going to put me on, these kinds of things. But to my shame, I am not taking cities to that event. Yeah, and luckily it is. So between the rivalry, it's becoming harder and harder to argue that I truly am number one at cities of Sigmar in the first martial. But I think I think I still have my title.
Maybe Fabian does a book review when it comes out eventually. I don't know.
I don't think that personally. We will discuss it. You can have both of us on, and I will be okay with that.
All right. I'm going. Bye. Hope you enjoyed. No, thank you everyone. Bye. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye. Bye for now. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.